We've got the full contingent. And, okay, guys, let's, okay, we're back on business. Okay. We've got the list here. And my thinking is if we can get through, most of this, that would be awesome. I think that the last bill from Senator Augustine may require some explanation. That may be something we're going to have to bump. So we're in session 11 o'clock, and so I'm thinking we may need to come back here. Want to take no chances with crossovers. Come back here probably tomorrow at 10 a.m., an hour, and then whatever loose ends, and then we'll be in, I think, pretty good darn shape here. So I think that's my plan. So let's work through here, and it'll make tomorrow even easier the more we can do now. So starting with we've got 3 bills that we're number 2 on. So I'm looking at 466 on the front page, and then on page 2, we've got the Watson Bill 815, the Henson Bill from JPR. We're all in the 2 spot there. Those committees have already acted, so that might be a good place.
Acted favorably. They've
all acted favorably and sent us bills. So why don't we start April with the bill from the Office of Attorney General, Senate Bill 466 from JPR.
Senate Bill 466, Vulnerable and Senior Adults, Theft of Property by Caregiver, Family Member, or Household Member Prohibition. Just a note on this one. So this one is primary in JPR. We were secondary on this bill, still not entirely sure why. We actually kind of tried to ask if we could be taken off of it, but it didn't happen. As introduced, this bill prohibits a caregiver, family member, or household member from knowingly and willfully taking property from a vulnerable adult or an individual age 68 or older with the intent to deprive the individual of that property. The JPR amendments strike the bill in its entirety. Instead, the amended bill prohibits a person who is a caregiver to or a family member of or household member of an individual from knowingly and willfully exerting unauthorized control over and obtaining the property of the individual with the intent to deprive the individual of the individual's property if 1, the individual, the victim, is a vulnerable adult, and 2, the person, the perpetrator, knows or reasonably should know that the individual is a vulnerable adult. A vulnerable adult is defined under existing law as an adult who lacks the physical or mental capacity to provide for the adult's daily needs. A household member is defined under existing law as an individual who lives with or is in regular presence in the home of the vulnerable adult. Violators are subject to a range of existing penalties applicable to the existing prohibitions against exploitation of vulnerable adults. This is all in criminal law.
Okay, so for some reason we are number 2 on a bill that involves nothing but criminal law, but that said, Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions. The first is what was the vote in JPR, and the second is I noticed the House cross-file passed 136-0. So is the amended version the same as what passed 136-0 in the House?
I don't know about that question about the House cross-file.
Okay, it was unanimous vote out of JPR? Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, the JPR vote was 11-0, at least whatever. Okay, is there a favorable motion from Senator Washington and a second from Senator Hester? Any questions about the bill, notwithstanding the unanimous vote out of JPR on the criminal law bill? All in favor of taking that 11-0 product out of JPR, raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Let's go to page 2. Devin, we've got the Watson bill, Senate Bill 815 out of the Finance Committee.
Senate Bill 815, Occupational Licensing and Certification, Criminal History, Prohibited Disclosures. This bill makes several alterations to existing statutory provisions that prohibit certain executive departments from denying an occupational license or certificate to an applicant solely on the basis of the criminal history of the applicant, unless the department makes a specific determination after consideration of all factors. The bill's charges include limiting application of the statute to only the Maryland Department of Labor, applying the statute to all ex-offenders, prohibiting Maryland labor from requiring an applicant for an occupational license or certificate to disclose specified criminal history information as a part of an application, and expanding the list of factors for consideration. There is a reprint of the bill from Finance on page 53 of your packet. The amendments that Finance added limit the prohibition of denials of licenses solely to the boards of barbers and cosmetologists. And Finance limited those bills to the boards specifically because those two boards do not require any home entry.
Senator Watson, as sponsor, any thoughts on the product emerging from the Finance Committee?
Yes, so I am not going to stop my own bill by any means. This is a start, but it is very disappointing because we work with the Department of Labor. There were many licensing opportunities for folks. This was, how do we 100% remove the redlining that, when people come out, make it easier for them to get jobs. These are nonviolent offenders, all right? We excluded fraud, and working with the Department of Labor, they said that this could be applicable, and they were on board with cosmetologists, barbers, electricians, plumbers, HVAC folk, and home improvement. And as much as we talk about, reentry and making folks, putting folks to work after they've done their time, after 3 years, according to this bill, to have Finance restricted just to barbers and cosmetologists is very disappointing to me. So I did talk to the chair. We agreed that it's a start. But I hope that in the future we can really do some things where folks who have served their time, non-violent offenses, have equal opportunities for employment. So I'd like to move the amendment and the bill.
So we have the sponsor moving the product favorable out of the Finance Committee. Is there a second? Second from Senator Washington. So we're taking the product as a whole from the Finance Committee. Discussion. All in favor of Senate Bill 815 as presented to us by the Finance Committee, raise your hand. All opposed? That motion carries. Let's go to the third bill where we're in the two spots. Senator Henson bill. This is out of JPR, Senate Bill 856. April.
Senate Bill 856, Mold, Landlord Requirements and Regulations, the Maryland Tenant Mold Protection Act. This bill requires the Maryland Department of the Environment, in consultation with the Maryland Department of Health, the Department of Housing and Community Development, Maryland Department of Labor, and the Department of General Services, to develop and update as necessary, 1, a centralized website that provides information about mold remediation and dampness, and 2, an informational pamphlet that includes specified resources related to mold. The bill establishes various requirements for landlords relating to mold in rental units, including, among other things, performing a mold assessment and remediation under specified conditions. By June 1st, 2027, MDE, in consultation with the other agencies, must adopt regulations to establish uniform standards for mold assessment and remediation as specified. There are amendments from the Judicial Proceedings Committee. These are on pages 56 and 57 of the voting packet. The amendments strike a requirement that the informational pamphlet be provided to renters every 2 years, and instead requires it to be provided on request of the tenant. This is after it retains the provision requiring the pamphlet to be provided at the time the lease or rental agreement is signed. It also alters the timeline for mold assessments and remediation under the bill. It would require assessment within 15 days after notice from the tenant or a housing authority of possibility of mold, and remediation within 45 days after an assessment that identifies mold, but has sort of a safety valve there that says if it's not feasible to do it within 45 days, it should be done within a reasonable time period.
Okay, Senator Gallion, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. What was the JPR vote? And also with the amendments, you talk about the 45 days, does that address the concerns that the Maryland Realtors had?
JPR vote was unanimous.
Okay, and then on the realtors, let me try to.
Of course, you never really, it's not that easy always to tell because, the bill gets amended. They may have, originally.
It's hard to work second.
Sure, no, absolutely.
They were 11-0.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have information about how their position may have changed, but I will say, so they were concerned that giving a landlord, the original bill said you had to do 45 days both for the assessment and remediation. So this says 15 days to the assessment and then 45 days after that assessment for the remediation. And then they also said that it could not be potentially not enough time. JPR did add in that provision saying that if it's not feasible to do it within that 45-day time frame, it just has to be done in a reasonable amount of time. So those positions at least were addressed, the JPR amendments. I don't know whether their position has changed.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan on the
Thank you, Mr.
JPR
Chair.
product.
Yeah, so I was the committee's representative in JPR for the hearing. I was not there for the voting list, for the voting session. I didn't see the amendments. And I typed that I was the representative in my record, but my notes are in my office, so I can't really share too much. I can just tell you that the hearing was impressive, that the witnesses were strong, and it was very persuasive to me. That's not that helpful, but I'm adding what I can since I was trying to represent the committee.
Okay, what's
Thank
hopefully
you.
helpful, it was an 11-0 vote. Maybe that
Yeah,
helps, I'm not sure.
It was good.
Okay, so any additional questions? Okay, is there a motion from our representative from JPR? Okay, motion from Vice Chair Kagan, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of the product out of JPR on Senate Bill 856, raise your hand. All opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Let's go back to page 1 and just go down this list. And we're going to start with Stacy on Senate Bill 29. And I promise you, we will get to the MDE bill. You guys have been very patient hanging out here. But, okay, Senate Bill 29.
Senate Bill 29, Education Phone-Free Schools Pilot Program Establishment. This bill establishes the Phone-Free Schools Pilot Program in Carroll and Montgomery counties to collect data to determine the effect of local school system policies that limit student use of cell phones during the school day on academic achievement, student classroom engagement, student social interactions, and other things. Eligible counties must each elect one middle school and one high school in the county to participate in the program, and there's a reporting requirement. There is one amendment in the packet from Senator Waldstreicher. It's on page 3. Essentially, this strikes the bill as drafted, and the amendments codify an existing MSDE policy. And this would require MSDE, in collaboration with stakeholders, to develop and periodically update guidelines for a policy on student use of personal electronic devices during school hours, provides for the components of that guidance. Each county board, in collaboration with specified stakeholders, must develop and adopt a policy that limits a student from using a personal electronic device during school hours and provides for the basic components of the policy. Senator Watson has asked to be a co-sponsor on this amendment.
Senator Gallion.
Yes, thank you. So I know some of the local LEAs are already doing different things. I mean, can't they all already do this if they want to without this bill?
Correct.
Okay.
I thought the senator said that by putting it in statute, it provides some kind of political oomph to making sure that everybody, I don't want to speak for him, but I think you communicated with him. Was there something of some of the advantage of putting it in code?
MSD already had a work group. They set up the policy. It would specify specific components. So for example, if a local policy that existed didn't have some exemptions for students with IEPs or a 5.0 floor plan, they would now have to add that as a component of their policy. So essentially, it standardizes to a certain degree, making sure that certain parts of the policy exist. and are based on best practices, the way that the stakeholder group convened by MSDE determined it to be.
Okay. Yes, Senator Attar? Okay, we've got Attar and Watson who'd like to be co-sponsors. Questions at this point from Senator Simonetti?
So I got feedback from my county. They're doing something already, and they didn't want that to change. Is this going to impact potentially what they're doing, and they'll have to adjust their program? And I guess have the school boards weighed in on this amendment? I mean, I know they were there for or at least saw the bill originally, but this is a new.
So again, MSDE had already been working on a student device policy before the session started. And so all of the counties were aware that that was occurring. And the only way that a county's policies would be impacted if it would probably conflict with the best practices determined by MSDE. So these are guidelines, and they're saying, look, here's what we consider model policies. They could adopt a model policy, but this just actually requires a county to have a policy, and it requires minor components in the policy. There's categories of items. It doesn't say exactly how they have to do it. For example, it would require them to look at the ages of students as they develop their policy. So one for elementary and possibly middle and high school, because each of those age groups and cohorts has different needs. And so that would require them to have a policy for all of those age groups. So if the county wasn't doing that now, then they would have to revise their policy, at least in consideration of that.
Okay, Senator Augustine?
As this has changed, because I'm looking at my notes here, and we had what looks like 3 or so different bills that were sort of in and around these same subject matter areas.
Right.
Now, as this changes, does this change this to be similar to, or why this one? Why not 130? Why not 368? I mean.
Because this is the MSD policy.
Well, no, but I'm asking, why does this bill get the MSDE policy versus the other bills? That's what I'm asking. Why this one?
Because the sponsor worked it that way. So the sponsor worked it that way?
Okay.
I mean, this is a very sort of I don't know.
Well, this is a framework bill. I mean, that's what I'll say. It does exactly what MSD had asked the counties to do.
Yeah, but I'm looking at Senator Benson's bill, and it literally says student cellular device use policy. Isn't that the exact same thing?
Well, it would require all the LEAs to adopt that specific policy
But if
and
it were
statute.
changed, if what you're doing with this one, you're changing that one just as the same thing.
Right,
to
at the
change this
request
one.
of the sponsor. That was his amendment. You don't have to adopt his amendment. You don't have to vote
Okay,
yes.
guys, why don't we, as I say, we're going to do some voting at 10 o'clock. Maybe we can powwow a little bit with Senator Waldstreicher. You know, I don't want to rush it. But before we do that, because we had a couple folks wanting to, any questions just before we move to the next bill, and we'll get some clarity from Senator Waldstreicher or everybody who has a question. Again, we're going to vote at least once, probably, between sessions again, so there'll be an opportunity here. So, okay, let's just hold the Senate Bill 29, and let's move on to Senate Bill 93 from Senator Kramer.
Senate Bill 93, Election Law, Absentee Ballot Application, Sending to Eligible Voters Before Primary Elections. This bill requires each local board of elections to at least 60 days before each statewide primary election send the state-approved absentee ballot application to each eligible voter. A local board of elections is not required to send the state-approved absentee ballot application to a voter who has a permanent absentee ballot status. There is one amendment from Senator Kramer on page 6 of your packet. This amendment would require a local board to send a written notice regarding request for a state-approved absentee ballot application with a specimen ballot voting packet or any other mailing to voters or potential voters to further awareness of the option of to provide further awareness to voters of the option of mail-in voting. A local board is not required to send the notice to any voters more than once per election or for a vote-by-mail election. Essentially, The amendments attempt to mitigate the very high fiscal note that would have been required otherwise. So essentially, the state board would add, or a local board would add a QR code on various mailings that already go out and allow the voter to automatically go into the system and find an absentee ballot application.
Questions for Stacy on the amendment proffered by Senator Kramer, Senator Kagan.
Sorry, I consider myself fairly tech savvy and tech forward. This is my other part of my life. As a nationally ranked Scrabble player, I play in a lot of national tournaments and I travel around, and I can tell you that people younger than me have no idea what to do with the QR code. They are QR resistant. They don't want to use it. They don't want to do it, and that's how we submit our scores for the record and stuff. I personally don't love QR codes for menus at restaurants and all that because I don't know where it's going to take me. I don't know what spam or viruses are going to be awaiting me and all that. I actually hate that idea, speaking for myself.
Yeah.
Senator Augustine.
So I don't see QR code in the amendment itself. I know it's an example, it's a way, but they also could just be like a little bit of space on there, a written notice that gives like a hyperlink or something like that. I mean, they could do that too. But here's the thing for me. What I will say though is that I'm way more supportive of this versus sending something separately every single time. And so I just will say that, like, I understand the idea is that we're going to let people know about the ability to do, to have this as an option and trying to elevate it a little bit and do so without additional expense. So I get that part. I will say that.
Any additional, Senator Carozza?
Trying now to understand exactly what this bill does. With the amendments, are they still being sent the application before the primary? Or does this QR code change that? I mean, I'm just.
It changes from a separate mailing, a mandatory separate mailing at a specific time. It requires a local board to include in an existing mailing to voters and potential voters some written notification that says, here is a link, or here is a QR code, or here is the web address to get to the absentee ballot application to further make voters aware that this is an option for voting.
So the underlying bill is requiring, it would be a new requirement for the local board of elections to send out the absentee ballot application. That's the underlying.
It's stricken, yes. That's stricken by the amendments, yes.
So the underlying bill is now gone.
Correct.
And now we're going to say the local board of elections are sending out, what are they sending out now?
With existing mailings, they have to include some sort of written notice about the availability of the absentee ballot or mail-in ballot voting application.
So it's mailings that they would already be doing?
Correct. It's to cut the cost of not having to pay for another mailing to go out to voters.
Okay, so
and
it's not a
potential
separate
voters.
mailing, just telling them about the absentee ballot application. It's
Correct.
now mailings that would already be going out before the
example-
primary, the mailing sent out by the local board of elections, which is just the informational
The
stuff that they.
specimen ballot, right, that includes the packet that has the mock-up of the ballot, so people can look at the ballot in advance and take it in with them and look at it. And if they send out any other mailings, they would have to include this written notice within that mailing.
The written notice about the absentee ballot application and how to
Correct.
access it.
Yes.
Any additional questions? Yes, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you. On page 9 of the packet, page 2 of the reprint, lines impossible to give, line 3 plus a minus. The whole thing about permanent absentee folks, forever and always, I always want to get my vote, my ballot in the mail. I have never been a fan because people die, people move, people leave town to go to school, and they are automatically being sent a ballot. So Senator Carrozza, where you were on that, Senator Carrozza, has always struck me as valid and a possibility of where fraud could happen. So the fact that we are exempting the permanent mail-in ballot people means, and I understand from a cost savings, but that means we don't get the Joe has moved and Sue has died and all that. And so we don't get that information 60 days in advance, which means that address is gonna get a ballot. Or not even the 60 days, but the shall send this information, but you don't have to do it.
Well, as far as I know, this does not tell
Preclude.
the local board not to send a specimen ballot to anyone on the permanent absentee ballot list. So
It
this
is
just
not required to send the notice to anyone who has permanent absentee ballot status.
Right, not required to do that.
Not required.
However, they're still going to send a specimen ballot. So if the notice is in that, it's going to go anyway. If the part of the mailing package for a specimen ballot includes this notice about availability, whether they're on the permanent absentee ballot list or not, they're still going to get this notice.
And will those go first or third class? I assume they're bulk mail.
I don't know.
Okay, it's relevant because everybody would want to save money. The question is whether returns would go back to our local boards of elections so they know who has died, moved, left to go to school, whatever it is. Like there's data that we're not able to update from a permanent, forever and ever absentee ballot list.
Okay, any other observations before we make an executive decision on what to do here? Any comments? Thoughts? Okay, let's hold this one too. I mean, honestly, there's no clear consensus on the committee on this one. Yeah, Senator Simon
I
Area.
was just gonna, it says to voters and potential voters. What does that mean?
Because if there's additional mailings, it's not just the specimen ballot. They send out a mailing to voters. For example, your voter registration card gets sent to you. That's an additional mailing. They could include in that another written notice about the availability of that. So any mailings that's already going out, they want to include this in there as
I
a
get that,
measure
but
of
what's the potential voter? I mean, registration and all that, and your
people
vote.
who are not registered.
So we send out mail to people who aren't registered?
I honestly, I don't know the answer to that, but
I mean, that's why I'm asking the question why that's
Right.
in there.
because that is, when I spoke to the state administrator, that was language he asked specifically to include.
Okay,
Yes.
that's just a question.
Okay, whatever we hold now, we may revisit this at 10 o'clock tomorrow. I just want to make, these, it doesn't mean that these bills are not moving forward. I just think that everybody seems to either get more information or get a more clarity about their own view on the bill and that kind of thing, okay? Let's go to the two bills we held yesterday before we adjourned were Senate Bill 175 and then the MDE fee bill 250. Let's go to 175, Devin.
Senate Bill 175, Public Safety Corrugated Stainless Steel Tubing for Fuel Gas Piping Systems Requirements and Prohibitions. As introduced, the bill requires that only corrugated stainless steel tubing that meets the requirements of the LC 1027 standard described in the most recent edition of the International Fuel and Gas Code issued by the International Code Council, or has proven to withstand at least 36 coulombs of electrical arcing charge by an electrical arcing test, may be used in the new construction of a customer-owned natural gas or liquefied propane piping system in a building, or a natural gas or liquefied propane piping system in a renovated building, or in a natural gas liquefied propane piping system that requires the addition of a new gas line to the piping system. The bill also prohibits the sale, transfer, or distribution of CSST that does not meet those requirements. A person who violates either of the bill's provisions is subject to a civil penalty of up to $1,000. The bill takes effect October 1, 2027. There are amendments beginning on page 10 of your packet. The amendments strike the LC 1027 standard requirement and instead prohibit the sale of non-conductive, jacketed, corrugated stainless steel tubing. The violations remain the same. In addition, the amendment requires that the Department of Labor, in collaboration with the State Fire Prevention Commission and the Fire Marshal, to study the prevention of fire hazards associated with corrugated stainless steel tubing. Senator Lewis Young has approved of both of those amendments, and it's important that the third-party entity that is the State Fire Prevention Commission not be obviously in charge of the study. That was more on the Maryland Department of Labor, which they agreed to.
Okay, so just, just two things. So on the definitional, that first, just to clarify, because you did some research about why that definition and what we were doing there was relevant to the intent of the bill. And then the second had to do with a study that's not a third-party Department of Labor, but it involves an advocate who has taken positions on this. Seemed a little odd. So those are kind of the two key components, I think. But on the just
Correct.
the definitional issue that was modified in this amendment.
So, yes, so non-arc resistant jacketing is how the bill was introduced, and that does not cover the actual problem that the folks who testified in support of this bill had. The actual terminology that has to be used for this is non-conductive jacketed corrugated stainless steel tubing. That is what the yellow, as they talked about, the yellow jackets, that is the yellow jacket tubing that needs to be, that in this bill they would prohibit.
The second part, yeah, let's go to Senator Augustine for question. Yeah.
Correct. It bans yellow. Yes, it bans.
Yeah, and the other was just, you can't have an advocate part of the study, so Department of Labor's third party, let third party independent entity do the, so we have amendments moved by Senator Gallion, second from Senator Augustine. Any discussion about those amendments? All in favor of the amendments to Senate Bill 175, raise your hand. All opposed? These amendments carry. We now have 175 as amended before us. Is there a motion from Senator Gallion? Is there a second from Senator Augustine? All in favor of Senate Bill 175 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Let's go next, April, to Senate Bill 250.
All right. Senate Bill 250, Department of the Environment, Fees, Penalties, Funding, and Regulation. Senate Bill 250 is a departmental bill from the Department of the Environment. The bill increases several fees and penalties that support various programs and special funds within the department and makes various other changes. It's been a little while since we've taken this up, so I'm going to just take a little moment to refresh everybody's memory. Page 13 are amendments requested by MDE. These were the ones discussed at the bill hearing. These remove provisions of the bill, so strike the changes that would be made to the Erosion and Sediment Control Responsible Personnel Training Program, Wetlands and Waterways Program, Lead Rental Registry, Voluntary Cleanup Program, and the Maryland Mining Program. So to just run through what remains in the bill. The bill with the MDA amendments would provide that effective June 1st, 2025, would make the following changes to the Maryland Clean Air Fund. It would expand the purposes for which the fund could be used to include pollution reduction, repeal a requirement that when the fund balance is at least $2 million, any additional money received by the department must be deposited into the general fund. And just to give a sense of what this fund is used for, this is basically supporting everything in their clean air program, permitting, pollution, addressing pollution, et cetera. And finally, would increase the cap on the emissions-based air quality operating permit fees set by the department. Those fees were last updated 15 years ago. The bill would raise the cap, and then the actual fees are set in regulation, but this is the maximum that those fees could be, and those fees are different for different categories of pollution. The current max in statute is $50, but that is authorized to be adjusted for inflation. So in statute, it says $50. The current fee in reality is $75 maximum. This would take the maximum to $200. So that's the clean air piece. The next piece is it would authorize the department to charge fees for processing and issuing septic permits and well construction permits in counties where local health departments cannot or will not perform those functions. These fees are capped at $575, but may be increased to keep up with inflation. So this is, if you think back to Senator Moutz's bill dealing with the privatization program of these same kinds of permitting fees. Right now, the counties do these programs. There are counties that are potentially unable or unwilling to continue doing those programs and want to return the authority to issue those permits to the department. Problem is, right now, under current law, the counties are allowed to charge fees for carrying out those permitting activities. The department is not. So if they take back that authority, they have to take on all these responsibilities but have no ability to charge for it. The bill also increases the per barrel oil transfer fee that supports the Maryland Oil Disaster Containment Cleanup and Contingency Fund, or oil fund, for fiscal 2026 through 2030. The issue here is this is sort of a weird area of the law where the fee is sort of raised for 5-year increments, and then that increase terminates. So it had been $7.75. That snapped back to $5 last year because the legislature failed to increase it last year. So this would take it back up to I believe $9 until 2030, and then it would snap again back to $5 if no further action was taken. Finally, the bill alters and enhances the regulatory framework governing the construction, reconstruction, repair, removal, modification, and operation of dams. We'll get into that a little bit later there's some amendments, further amendments that we'll be considering around that. But specifically would require dam owners to annually register with the department, establish a new special fund and related fees, and that special fund could be used for owners of these dams that, under current law, they are required to take certain actions if the department finds that those dams are potentially at risk of failing or could cause certain hazards. The issue is right now a lot of these private dam owners don't necessarily have the funds to make those repairs. This would, using these registration fees and some additional hazard fees that or safety fees for when people are applying for permits to construct dams, would take that money, put it into a special fund that could then be used for financial assistance to dam owners that need to make repairs or take other emergency actions. Finally, the bill requires the department to include additional information in the factors used to calculate the annual fees that must be paid by a generator of coal combustion byproducts, which accrue to the State Coal Combustion Byproduct Management Fund. Specifically, the bill would allow for the application of these fees to coal ash that has been landfilled or stored. You might recall we had a separate bill from Senator Jackson on this issue, but the issue is coal ash that has been landfilled that is causing environmental harms. So this would allow the department to sort of require people who have that landfilled coal ash to pay a fee, which again goes into a special fund that is used for the purpose of addressing pollution from coal ash. So that is the bill. Any questions on the bill before we dive into amendments?
Okay, could I just make, first of all, maybe MDE, we got Team MDE in the House. Why don't you guys just come up here, because I think we could have some questions. I think that would be helpful, number one. And then secondly, just before we go into amendments, I think just big picture, because nobody likes any kind of fee increases, but what's being done in all these programs is pretty darn important, and they're almost certainly going to continue to be done. Problem is, right now, MDE is operating in a deficiency in a lot of these programs, and so if you don't have special fund user fees to pay for it, it's all going to come out of the general fund. So I've just big picture is this, I think in part, I don't know philosophically, is transitioning from using general funds to fill the gap to a model whereby it's, it's on the users of these programs. And so I think that, keep that in the back of your mind a little bit before we start talking about the amendments. So before we do that, Senator Washington, just on the underlying bill before we discuss amendments.
I was going to talk about the amendments that I would, the ones that I had a conversation and I would withdraw.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So if anybody has any other questions.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we go back to you, April, and then we'll take it from there. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Gallion, yeah.
Mr. Chair, so just looking through my notes here, for the fees that are going to be set, how many of those in the future are tied to CPI as far as increasing those? Are there some of those fees that are tied to CPI? Can you tell us which ones?
So, Stephanie, you can correct me here.
And tell us maybe who you are if you're going to answer any of these
Sure.
questions, and put the mic close to you. Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Alex Butler, Deputy Director of Government Relations for the Maryland Department of the Environment. Just flipping through the 5 here we have left in the bill. The oil transfer fee is not tied.
Just make it a little louder.
Sure. The oil transfer fee is not tied to CPI inflation. Correct. Air pollution is not either, or air pollution is the one, I'm sorry. Private dam repair would not be tied to inflation, and our septic and well would not either. So just the one, just the air
So the air
emissions.
pollution, where does that start? Forgive me, I'd have to find it. What's the amount it would start out before it starts going up?
Right now it's 50 in statute and with a CPI, so it's up to about 65, 67, or 75, 76 dollars, and this would increase it to $200.
Okay, and then I also had written about, there's an increase in in civil fines. What is that for lack of reporting? What would that be tied to, and how much are those?
Were you just looking at the sort of the header on the bill where it says
Yeah, any kind of civil fine.
it's likely due to the dam repair fund? We have civil enforcement.
Oh, that might change in an amendment?
We do have some amendments that are going to modify
All right,
some.
well, we
That's
can-
why maybe, you know what, it might be helpful if we, if April, start talking about some amendments which may make some of these questions moot to some extent or altered. So why don't we go down that route, April?
Okay. So I will start with Senator Hester's amendments on page 14. Of your voting packet. Let me just get there. There are pieces of the reprint that begin on page 17. I didn't include the whole thing, just the pieces that were being amended. So Senator Hester's amendments speak specifically to the dam safety parts of this bill and the dam permits. So the amendments would exempt small, low-hazard dams, both from the dam safety permit requirements and also from the dam registration fees. Would also, her amendments are on page 14, but the language exempting them from the fees, if you look on page 18, this is for the dam safety permit. This section does not apply to a reservoir, dam, waterway obstruction, or small pond that is exempt from permit requirements under Section 5-503B of this title. So those are small, low-hazard dams that are already exempt from certain permitting requirements. The amendments would also alter the basis of dam safety permit fees. So this is halfway down the page on page 18. The safety permit fee shall be based on the estimated project construction cost and may not exceed 3% of the estimated project construction cost. The next provisions are on page 19. So again, we're exempting those small, low-hazard dams. So this is from the new registration and registration fee requirements. It specifically says that this section applies to a dam that is included in the Maryland Dam Inventory. So there is sort of a defined set of dams, universe of dams that this section was always intended to apply to. This would spell that out in statute. Does not apply to a dam that is owned by the federal government. It would push back the requirement to register and pay the registration fee to January 1st, 2027. And then it would spell out the fees in statute. So for a low hazard dam, $200, significant hazard dam, $500, and high hazard dam, which is the biggest, and $1,000. Moreover, it would require the department to establish a hardship waiver for entities not able to pay those fees.
Yeah, and as we're going through, and I know Senator Croza had a question, but here, Senator Hester, these are your amendments. Why don't you chime in, and then we'll ask, Senator Croza can ask a question.
Okay, so first, and MD, please correct me if I'm right or wrong. I thought the dam safety fees, that by making them linked to the construction costs of the bigger construction pay, pay in accordance, that was in line with what other states were charging around us. And by capping it at 3%, we'd be in line with like Virginia and Pennsylvania and the like.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Lee Curry. I'm Director of the Water and Science Administration at MDE. Those capping the fees at 3%, that's in line with what California charges. And the way we looked at it, we scaled it. So we did 3% for, when we were estimating fees, it would be a type of scaled fee that would decrease as the cost went up. The percentage would decrease. So we were 3% to 2% to 0.5%.
So you're still going to establish this in regs. This is just kind of capping it, making sure that it doesn't go over 3%.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then, I was really curious who was on the Maryland Dam Inventory list. And so they sent me a copy. It looks like it's about 500 dams, and about half of those were private sector. And I think that the people who are going to have to, they're already paying, they already have to have the risk fee, but when they have to register, I thought that that's going to be harder for an individual or a homeowners association, than it might be for a company or something, I don't know. But the people who own these dams may have different levels of ability to pay the registration fee. And therefore, I wanted to delay this so that we could build up the fund from the new construction projects. We'd start to get some money in this fund, and then by the time the registration fees kicked in for everybody, there would be money in the fund that could help to support them paying for it if they couldn't do it otherwise. And my concern was particularly like either a really small HOA or a nonprofit, or maybe an individual who happens to have a farm, one of these things on their farm or something like that. I'm not sure why the federal government is excluded. You guys know?
Okay. Any thoughts on why the feds are excluded?
I mean, that was in the original bill.
Okay. Then.
So I don't see, if the state is permitting the county has to pay. So why would we be excluding the federal government? That seems odd.
Is there a legal, I don't know if there's some, it's like you can't tax, half of DC is exempt from DC tax because the feds can't be taxed by a local, Ross, you may have some thoughts on that, but supremacy clause of the Constitution may. Okay.
I don't have an answer for that. I don't want to guess it.
Okay, Senator Croza, you had a question. We'll keep going here, but just as we go through here, let's get some questions.
Thank you,
on the
and
table.
thanks, Senator Hester, for the explanation. I'm just trying to understand who are the users? And we're saying these are user fees. And then we talked about new construction, then we just talked about homeowners association. So who are the users?
I have a spreadsheet, and I can pull it up for you if you want to take a look, but I can't.
Is it, can you answer, is it a mix of companies? Is it a mix of who?
It's a mix. So if we look at, there's 557 dams
Right,
in Maryland. There are 57 owned by the state. There's 214 owned by local governments and 261 that are privately owned. Of those privately owned, it can range anywhere from a homeowners association to an industry, like a utility owning a private dam that holds drinking water back, to some irrigation ponds that are located on farms.
so the 557 dams, those are the ones, did you say, owned by the state?
No, there's 557 total dams on Maryland's inventory of dams.
Okay,
And that's part of what, that information goes to a national inventory list that every state has to provide that. There's actually 20,000 small structures that are like dams in
and
Maryland.
then it's broken down by ownership, the 557?
And those 557, 261 are privately owned. 214 are owned by local governments, 57 are owned by the state, and 25 are owned by the federal government.
So when we talk about the user fees, and then I heard the new construction, are the user fees an annual fee? And then in addition, the users, if they have new construction or projects, those would be additional fees on top of the annual fees? Is that what we're talking?
There's an annual dam registration fee where
Okay.
Senator Hester just talked about I think we talked about the fee staggering. I think it was 200 for low, 500 for a significant hazard, and 1,000 for high hazard. High hazard, if a high hazard dam fails, it's likely to result in loss of life, significant loss of property. There's a second fee that's in there, and that's the fee for a construction or repairing a dam. That fee does not apply to any maintenance for a dam. Maintenance would be taking down trees, filling holes, caulking up the dam itself, but it would apply to if the spillway, if they need to reconstruct it, fix it, do some major work, that would apply to that type of work. And there's about 20 to 30 permits, applications that we receive a year.
So right now, before we even talk about new user fees, right now, you have the annual dam fee, right? Registration.
No, this is proposing two fees. Yes.
Right, but
and
what currently exists?
None.
Okay, so this is proposing an annual fee for all the privately owned dams, or?
The fee would be for all the dam owners, but the fund would be used for repairs for private dam owners. And the reasoning behind that is because many times if a private dam fails, it ends up taking county and state resources to either go in and deal with the emergency response or to go in and sometimes help with not repairs, but it's going to cost the county and the state money if they fail.
And then the second fee is specifically to projects, construction, repair, note, but not maintenance.
That's correct.
And how's the maintenance paid? Is
There-
is that part of the annual?
No, there is no fee for any maintenance work that's done. Just repairs and construction.
Okay.
Okay, April, is there, yeah, we'll go back to you, April.
Yeah, and so and then the final piece of Senator Hester's amendment on page 20 adds uncodified language requiring the department to notify the owners of dams included in the Maryland dam inventory. So that's this universe of 500 dams that we've been talking about, of the registration fee requirement under the the bill on or before October 1st, 2025, and again on or before October 1st, 2026. So that would be in advance of that fee kicking in or that registration requirement kicking in under the amendments on January 1st, 2027.
You guys, and so just so we're clear for the committee, you have worked with Senator Hester on some of these amendments? I mean, you're aware of all these amendments? I mean, is there anything, I should have asked you, Senator Hester, you've collaborated to some extent here with MDE on these amendments that are being described, just to be clear?
Yes, I told them I was concerned about the ability for the nonprofits, the farmers, and the individuals to pay for this. And that is, they explained to me that that was the purpose of the dam, sorry, of the fund. And then we added the bit about the waiver from paying the fee. And we staggered the timeline so that the new construction projects, you know, when they're getting their new safety permit, that will fill up the fund for the first couple years, which will then put the money in so that by the time we start charging people annually, then it will be, there'll be some money in that fund to help them out. So, I mean, if still, for the bigger organizations, you know, I think like they can handle it, and for the little ones, there will be the fund, and I feel like we're consistent with what other states are doing. So, and I think MD is happy with the amendment, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
they
this is your opportunity. Do you have heartburn over any aspect of the Hester amendments? This is your opportunity to weigh in and
MD
tell us
fully
that.
supports Senator Hester's amendments to the
Okay.
bill, consider them friendly. Thank you.
And then, Senator Washington, you indicated you were withdrawing your, oh. Okay, so we have the Hester amendments. Is there anything more to the Hester amendments?
No.
Okay. So we have the Hester amendments in front of us, but again, we're going to take a roll call on this because it's an important bill. But before we do it, any final questions for Senator Hester for the MDE panel? Okay, we got a new vote count person here. Okay, why don't we just do a roll call on just. Yeah, that's true. We haven't done that. You have move the amendment, Senator Hester, second from Senator Augustine. Okay, let's just do a hand call here. All in favor of the Hester amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, those amendments carry. Next, let's.
Can we also just procedurally roll the MDE amendments so that we're.
Yeah, okay, we do. Okay, separately, they're not in conflict? I mean,
No.
okay, so separately, not in conflict, the MDE amendments are on the table. MDE amendments have been moved by Senator Augustine, second from Senator Washington. Okay, all in favor of the MDE amendments, raise your hand. All opposed. Okay, those two sets of amendments have been adopted. Next. Senator Washington, what else do we have? Any
Yeah,
other?
so I can walk through. So our
Okay, Senator
next
Washington
senator-
has some amendments she's submitted.
Yes. So Senator Washington's amendments begin on page 21 of your voting packet. Reprint pages begin on page 25. So first, her amendments would add mitigation to the authorized purposes of the Clean Air Fund. So that's on page 25. The next piece, I think, is the piece Senator Washington said she did not want to proceed with, the 2 million cap.
Right. I had a very good discussion with the secretary because I had some questions about it. And so I think the point that was made that the expectation is that this department had the expectation of sort of self-funding, and that hadn't really been pursued over the years. And so I understand, one, the importance of funding the programming, but also helping to support of this private dam program. So I would remove that one. So that would, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a cap. I was saying that if they make more money, they can keep it rather than putting it into the general fund because they.
Senator Carrozza, she's withdrawn that.
Yeah,
That's
I'm
not on the
withdrawing
table.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next piece of this, if we go on to page 27, so the department bill would raise the maximum per ton fee on regulated emissions to to $200, up from 50, but really it's at 75 right now. Senator Washington would bring that back down to $100. Do we want to take this piece by piece? Or do we want
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Okay, do you want to go back to that, the first?
So the first one was
Yeah.
just adding mitigating to the, mitigating air pollution to the thing, authorized uses of the Clean Air Fund.
And I have a document where, I mean, I don't agree with all of them, but where they have said that that MDE agrees with some and disagrees. So they agree with the mitigating one.
Okay, let's just confirm that this specific.
Well, it's right here from them.
No, well, they're right
Right.
physically here, so we can ask them in person.
And move favorable on this amendment?
We can do it.
One at a time?
Yes.
Okay, but before we do that, I want you all are good with this specific mitigate, this is good for you
Yes,
guys?
adding mitigation
Okay,
is fine with us.
okay, so on that amendment, we've got a motion from the vice chair, a second from Senator Augustine. Did you have a question? Okay, all in favor of that Washington amendment, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, the other second amendment was withdrawn. The third amendment was taking this, what was now essentially 200 down to 100 in effect. Okay, so on that, just tell us, what is the impact, what would the impact of that, as opposed to where, what the 200 would give you, just so the committee has a full understanding of what the implications are?
Sure. Thank you. Chris Hoagland, Director of the Air and Radiation Administration. Thank you for having us, and thanks for the question. The department proposed $200 per ton because that would be sufficient for the fees to cover the cost of our federally delegated program. We are delegated authority from the federal government under the Clean Air Act to award and enforce permits. One of the requirements of that delegation is that we charge sufficient fees to cover the cost of that program. We do not currently charge sufficient fees to cover the cost of that program, so we are not meeting that requirement for the federal delegation. Raising the fees to $200 would be sufficient to meet that requirement. Raising it only to $100 would not be sufficient to meet that requirement.
Sure, Senator Washington.
Because is it up to 200 or is it 100? Is it up to, in other words, is this raising the cap or is this setting the price? Because you said that it's currently 75, and so I'm.
Correct. The text is the fee may not exceed
Right,
a
so,
certain value.
Okay, so I was reading it as they were setting the fee at 200, so that would be one I would also be, withdraw.
That amendment's been withdrawn. Let's go to the next Washington amendment.
The next Washington amendment is on pages 27 through 28. Senator Washington has proposed striking the language authorizing MDE to charge a fee for processing and issuing on-site sewage disposal permits and individual well construction permits in the event that a county transfers those responsibilities to MDE.
And again, so that is one that I would strike, again, understanding the dynamic, didn't realize they were taking it over.
Okay, so,
So I'm good with that.
I'm sorry?
No, I'm good with their ability, if they have to
Okay.
take over responsibility for permitting, that they can
Okay,
charge
so
a fee.
we're not taking up that amendment? Okay.
Okay, so the next
I
one.
do have a question about on page 625, where I changed just the reporting.
I was just about to get to that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
let's go back to
so
April.
Page 28 requires an existing annual environmental enforcement report to be submitted to this committee and ENT instead of the Legislative Policy Committee.
What's the rationale?
Well, because we're the committee that these bills come to, and we can make it in addition to, but, and I don't know what the process is for the Legislative Policy Committee, but do they review all the reports and make plans for the session and things like that? So,
Yeah, do you guys have a, why did you choose in the, your packet.
I don't think they did choose. That's current law. I think that's something that this committee actually passed a couple of years ago. I don't know why we put it in LPC. I will say, all of
Needs
these.
year-round. I mean, they do. They receive information year-round. They're staffed year-round.
I mean, I'm on that committee, but,
Yeah.
okay, what were you going to say?
I would just say all of these reports, any sort of report that comes to the legislature, whether or not it's a specific committee, goes to the library. So if there's any reports that anybody is interested in, I would just, I think you can even get on a mailing list and get notified when those reports get submitted, but yeah.
Okay, well, Senator Washington,
Doesn't matter.
what's that? I mean,
She wants it there.
I mean, how important is it? So we just add the two committees?
So one of the things, I guess, Mr. Chair and committee, I'm trying to establish that we should have as a committee, a relationship, a relationship to receiving information, sharing information. I know that we've had challenges.
Is anybody,
in the past.
is everybody okay with just, in addition to the
Just add
Legislative
it.
Policy Committee, we
Yeah.
add this
Yeah.
committee and the Environment and Transportation Committee. Everybody okay with that? Okay, we're good on that one.
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Okay. The next one is on page 29. Restores language, we're now in the oil transfer fee part of the bill. Restores language requiring an applicant for that oil transfer permit to provide evidence to MDE that they have implemented state and federal plans and regulations to control pollution as a condition precedent to the issuance or renewal of an oil transfer license. I just will say I spoke to somebody in MDE about this, and they don't have a problem with restoring it to the law. Their feeling was just that it was duplicative of their licensing requirements, but I don't want to speak to them.
This was existing law. I didn't understand why we would strike it, and so I just said put it back.
Okay, so it's,
I don't think it does any harm.
okay, it does no harm, it's duplicative, but there's no harm putting it in. Are we good? Everybody good? Okay, let's go.
All right. Next one is on pages 30 and 31. These amendments would define the term dam and private dam for the purposes of section 5-203.1.
Was there a change of price, or is that?
That's in the bill. So this is that I went over earlier.
Oh, that's.
So, yeah, the amendments don't affect it, but the bill raises that price, which recently had been 7.75, and I'm sorry, I said dollars, but it's 7.75 cents.
Up to 9.
It takes it up to 9 cents.
Thank you.
Back on pages 30, 31, you
30,
say?
31,
Okay.
adds definitions for dam and private dam to section 5-203.1. Which I believe.
So the department said that this definition was current with their code of regulations of definitions. And you were saying to resist it because it's, I guess I was, if it's defined in code. I mean, you were resisting, so I just wanted to.
Sure.
Why, yeah.
We were, because that definition that's in the Code of Maryland Regulations applies to 20,000 dams in Maryland or 20,000 structures. And the intent of this section of the bill was to limit it to the 557, which are the dams that are on the Maryland inventory of dams. So we were resistant because we thought it would add confusion, and this is not intended to apply to those 20,000.
And I think with Senator Hester's definitions and things, I feel more comfortable because it's just that it was very vague. So I think your definitions, we don't need to define it, but it was undefined in the section, so.
Okay, let's go to the next Washington amendment.
Next Washington amendment is starting on page 32. So this is the dam safety permit. So this, I will say, all right, so this would require fees to be set in regulation by September 1st, 2026, and prohibit the department from subsequently modifying the fees without legislative enactment.
So, again, I was sympathetic to the idea that they wanted to get the fee system going. I'm not comfortable with fees being just raised without a cap or et cetera, just by regulation. But if they wanted to get it started, I said they could get it started and set it so they could do the research and figure out what it needs to be. We could do it through ALR, we'll be able to let them. But after that, if there's any increase, that it would be done like every other fee, and it would have to be done by regulation. That would, to me, was that, of course, they resisted because they want the flexibility to be able to set the fees whenever they want to set the fees, but I wasn't comfortable with it.
Okay, do you want to articulate for the committee? Obviously, I think you probably articulated your position, but why don't you speak for yourself?
So I think, with Senator Hester's amendments, we do have that percentage cap on those fees as well. So that's sort of an additional guardrail. And then, we have an outline of what we intend to charge for fees, which is very consistent with other states. And, we proposed that, and we're happy to either, enshrine that in legislation and statute, or, just go ahead with the language with the cap, whatever the committee deems appropriate.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure, yeah, Senator Hester.
Are we talking about setting the fees just for the dam section, or was it for the other parts of the bill as well?
This is, as written, is just for the dam safety permit fees.
So if you accept Senator Hester's amendment, haven't you already set the fees?
So you've been going back and forth on this amendment. A prior version of the amendment showed, for projects under $500,000, it was going to be this percentage. For projects between $500,000 and $1 million, it was going to be this percentage, and it went all the way up to 3%, or all the way down to 3%, one or the other. I thought that was super prescriptive, and so I suggested that we leave it like higher level, but have that cap at 3%. I'm open for suggestions, but I was nervous about really codifying those exact numbers in the bill.
So that's where I thought that allowing them to spend the time to determine what they want, determine the structure, et cetera, and then initially set that in regulation, and then we could codify it.
Yeah, we're going to be here next year, right?
Yeah, exactly. Rather than figuring it out, it gives them time to really set it up.
So I'm sorry, where is the actual language that we're looking at, April?
This is on page 33. But this doesn't say that they would have to come back and codify it. This says that they could set it up in regulation, but then they could never change it.
Yeah, well, I guess that's right. So any change would have to be.
Well, and so that was my question about the other fees in the bill. And the other fees in the bill, do we set them and then do they change them, or do they set them and they're just set?
There's a lot of different ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ones, yeah. Some of them are set, some of them are maximum caps are set. So what I would say is that Senator Hester's amendments essentially set a cap on how high those fees could be, which would be consistent with some of the other things happening in the bill. But
Okay,
I don't feel that strong.
Okay,
just-
I think-
There was an
yeah.
absence of anything in the original.
No,
bill,
well, now we've got some guardrails to the point of the MD. We've got a cap, we've got some guardrails. They don't have unlimited flexibility, or so I'd say if you're okay, let's kind of move on. What else do we have from Sarah Washington?
We're close.
Okay.
All right, so next is pages 33 through 34. The bill, as it came in, right now, in the dam inspection sections, it talks about water infrastructure assets and asset owners. The department has proposed replacing those references with the term dam. Senator Washington's amendments would restore the current language and would also strike a definition that the department has added for unsafe condition.
Okay, MDE.
Changing the definition from water infrastructure asset to dam was intended to just be clarifying. It's a code cleanup provision here. We are perfectly happy to revert back to water infrastructure asset if the committee wishes. It was simple, we get questions, what is water infrastructure asset? Is it a pier? Is it sort of all kinds of questions? Dams.
Okay, is everybody okay then just reverting back and taking the Washington Amendment on this one issue?
Yep.
Okay.
That's what they say.
What about the definition of unsafe condition?
Oh, what about the definition of unsafe condition?
Yeah, we think it provides clarity, but we're fine either way.
Okay.
Because we could define it through policy or other ways, so.
Because that could change.
We okay with that?
Striking it, yeah.
Okay.
Great.
And then the last one is moot because we are no longer Senator Washington withdrew the September 1st.
Senator Washington, consistent with that discussion about the Washington amendments, would you like to move the agreed upon amendments?
Let's move.
Favorable and
Agreed upon.
second
Hester
from Senator
Washington.
Augustine. All in favor of those agreed upon Washington amendments, raise your hand. All opposed? We now have in front of us the bill, Senate Bill 250, as amended by the Hester amendments and some of the Washington amendments. And we will take, absolutely, the MDE amendments are all part of the package.
Move favorable as amended.
Favorable motion for Senator Augustine, second from Senator how about this? Senator Washington moves favorable and a second from Senator Hester, because okay, we're going to do a roll call on this because it's fee increases and I get the politics of all that. So, Lamourie, we're going to do a roll call on Senate Bill 250 as amended.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine. Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion. Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson. Senator Watson, yes. Senator Attar. Senator Attar, yes. Senator Brooks. Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carrozza. Senator Carrozza, no. Senator Hester. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington. Senator Washington, yes. Senator Salmoneer. Senator Salmoneer, no. And Senator Feldman.
Yes, shockingly, it's an 8-3 vote, and motion carries. Okay, let's.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know you guys were patient, and I appreciate you sticking around. Okay, let's, is Stacy here? She's coming. Okay, I want to just get real quickly through these Stacy Goodman bills, and we'll end with the Muse bill, and Senator Augustine is going to take opportunity. We can have an initial conversation about the Augustine bill. So Stacy, why don't we go down, just knock out let's go with Senate Bill 543,
Sure.
Senator Kagan.
Senate Bill 543, Election Law, Provisional Ballots, Nonpartisan Board of Education Contests. This bill establishes that an individual is qualified to vote a provisional ballot they have cast if the provisional ballot was cast because the individual claimed a different political party affiliation from their political party affiliation on record, and the local board determines that the individual made a selection in a nonpartisan Board of Education contest on the ballot. The local board must count only the votes cast by the individual in a nonpartisan Board of Education contest. There are no amendments.
Okay, Senator Kagan, anything you want to add?
Stacy did a great job, as always. I'm just going to remind you, just very brief show and tell. This is when you show up, well, let's see. What's the easy way? When you vote in the right place at the right time, all your ballot, everything on the ballot counts, however you voted. It's perfectly lovely. if you vote in the wrong location, any race that you're allowed to vote for is counted, and those that you're not allowed to vote for aren't counted. So if you show up at, let's say, an early vote site, but it's not your precinct and it's on election day, your vote for governor or attorney general is fine, but maybe you're in the wrong legislative district, so that wouldn't count, but everything else would count. The problem only comes during primary only, and it does happen when people come in and they say, I'm unaffiliated, I know I'm unaffiliated, but I really, really, really want to vote in the Democratic or Republican primary. And they insist, and judges generally don't fight with the voter, they don't argue. So they cast a whole ballot, and currently, virtually all of our locals throw out the ballots, reject the whole thing. You may remember that I ripped it up. So this would just say, you're eligible to vote for Board of Education, and Maryland tends to want people to vote when they're eligible to vote. So nonpartisan, you would have been able to vote for the nonpartisan Board of Education because you're an unaffiliated voter, or you're a Republican trying to vote as a Democrat, or a Democrat trying to vote as a Republican. The one thing you would be eligible for is school board, and this would enable you to vote for that. Happy to take questions.
Okay, Senator Gallion.
So I was looking at the info letter from Maryland Association of Election Officials. It looks like, for the most part, they like the concept, but they had looked like some concerns with the additional complexity in the processing, the extra verification steps, ballot separation, duplication, manual review. So after that, they also said, despite those increased burdens, they support the effort that every vote, the lines with every vote counting. And then they kind of left it with, they urge the General Assembly to consider the resource implications of this change and to work with the State Board of Elections officials to ensure sufficient training, staffing, and technological support.
Yep. So I'm going to read you one paragraph that was sent by one of the county directors, because provisional ballots are numerous and growing. So for every provisional ballot, we have to review it on the back end. It will not take more time to accept a ballot if a voter voted the wrong ballot. For the duplication process, so this, sorry, hold on, I need the good sheet here. So for this, they would have to take the ballot that the voter voted, and they would get a new ballot, just like the mail-in when the people vote, online, and they print them out. They have to duplicate the ballot. They would take a new empty ballot and just duplicate the school board. So just reading that part again. For the duplication process, I don't see how there will be so many more if we duplicate just the Board of Ed contest, where it would take much more time or money. In almost all we do with each law and regulation that speaks to a ballot, we move in the direction of voter intent. The voter's choice for all contests they are eligible to vote in should be counted as accepted.
Okay, additional questions for the sponsor, Senator Kagan. This bill has no amendments. Any further discussion? Would you like to move your bill?
Bill.
Okay, Senator Kagan moves the bill favorable. Senate Bill 543, second from Senator Augustine. Discussion. Okay, all in favor of the bill? Clean, raise your hand. All opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Senator Watson is excused. Okay, let's go. Senator Kagan, Stacy, Senate Bill 633.
Senate Bill 633, Campaign Finance, Political Organizations, Disclosure of Solicitations. If you recall, the committee heard this, what, a day ago, yesterday? One day. This bill requires certain persons that solicit for a candidate or a political party and use the candidate's name, image, or likeness in the solicitation to include a specified disclaimer on the solicitation. The bill also requires certain persons that solicit for what appears to be a charitable purpose to include on each solicitation a statement that contributions or donations to the person are not necessarily used for charitable purposes and are not tax deductible. The state administrator of elections or their designee is authorized to investigate potential violations and may prohibit a violator from soliciting contributions or donations for a period of time or impose a civil penalty of up to $10,000. The amendment is on page 42 of your voting packet. And this amendment, this strikes the language regarding a solicitation for a charitable purpose and the associated disclosure, and substitutes a solicitation for an electoral or political purpose and adds an associated disclosure of 5 recipients to which the person made the largest expenditures or disbursements during the immediately preceding calendar year, and it authorizes the state board to adopt regulations. The question for the committee last time was, why the change? So having talked to the state administrator, political action committees, PACs, by their very nature, cannot solicit donations for charity. So that part of the bill essentially was nonsensical. So it came out to make a different type of disclosure if they were soliciting for an electoral or political purpose. And again, what they're trying to do is say, hey, we're asking for donations or contributions to this candidate or for this cause, but then they don't take those contributions or donations and actually use them for that purpose. They essentially say, oh, we use them for salaries, and basically they steal your money. They don't get used for any purpose. So that's the intent of this bill, is to stop these kind of scam political action committees who use the process to get money and then don't use it for the purposes for which they are soliciting.
Senator Kagan, you want to add?
I want to Senator Carozza asked a real life question yesterday, and I printed out, my staff printed out. Ken Cuccinelli in Virginia, there was a group that raised $20 million from more than 9,000 conservative donors who said that it was going to be going to Ken Cuccinelli, and it did not. And they got 3 years of jail time. And I've got the article, 3 years in prison, who defrauded Ken Cuccinelli, who sued them. And I'm happy to share that, share the article if you like. So it's really, as I said yesterday, it's consumer protection and anti-fraud. We passed it unanimously in committee last year and in the floor last year unanimously. It is a slightly smaller bill, as Stacy said. Last year, you had to disclose more of the large donors. It's smaller and Jared Demarinis said that it could be done with existing resources, which unfortunately is not exactly the way the fiscal note looks, but we don't expect this to be a big problem, but we want it to be a disincentive for anyone being a bad guy.
Okay, Senator Carozza.
Understand the problem we're trying to solve. Thank you. What I'm trying to understand with the amendment is, what about the legitimate PACs that are carrying on their business appropriately? What does this now require with this 5 recipients? And
No change.
so what does this language mean, this 5 recipients? On page 42, the 5 recipients to which the person made the largest expenditures. What is?
They still have to include the disclosure on the solicitation, regardless of whether if it's a legitimate PAC, they still would have to make the disclosure.
Disclosure on the solicitation or on the reporting?
Yes, on the solicitation. If a person subject to this section solicits for what appears to be an electoral or, what's the other word here? Electoral or political purpose, the person shall include on each solicitation disseminated by the person a clear and conspicuous statement that of the 5 recipients to which the person made the largest expenditures or disbursements during the immediately preceding calendar year.
So the way this would work in practicality, you would receive a PAC flyer solicitation for a candidate, but on that same solicitation, it would have to list the top 5 either individuals or organizations they've given to in the past?
Correct.
And that's to ensure the.
It's only for independent expenditures, though.
This section applies to a person required to file reports under 13-306, 307, or 309. Those are independent expenditures, electioneering expenditures, and one other. And it says a political action committee that is not affiliated with a corporation or a labor organization, so they're exempted from the requirements of this, or exclusively makes independent expenditures or disbursements for electioneering communications. So there are exemptions. It won't apply to every single pact. It ones to the ones clearly under those sections.
So the sheriff was supposed to be here today and something came up.
Okay, well, I mean, Jared was going to be here, but he couldn't make it.
He's going to be here tomorrow.
Okay, do you want to, okay, let's, we'll bump this to our morning voting
okay, I
session.
wanna make
so
sure that we
Mr.
give
Demarinis
exactly
can be here and answer all. The broader version of this bill did pass unanimously out of the chamber last year, but that's not relevant for this session. I think it, the thing with the, yeah.
It was 10 last year, and then it was, this year's is 5. I have the 2024 bill, and it was the 10 largest. So we made it narrower this year.
Okay, but every year's different, and
Yep.
nobody's obliged to vote the same way next session. Okay, so we're going to hold that till the morning session. We'll get Mr. Demarinis here. Stacey, let's just go down to 770, Senator Guile.
Okay. Senate Bill 770, applicants for positions involving direct contact with minors, required information, review process, and reporting alterations. This bill requires child care centers and youth-serving organizations, as defined by the bill, to follow certain procedures when hiring applicants for positions involving direct contact with minors. The bill generally incorporates these requirements within current statutory provisions that govern hiring procedures for other specified positions involving direct contact with minors. However, the bill also expands these provisions to apply to boundary violating behavior, also is defined by the bill. As a result, additional information must be submitted by applicants for a position involving direct contact with minors and considered by prospective employers pursuant to hiring procedures under current law. The bill also requires a local board of education, non-public school, or contracting agency, in addition to a child care center or youth-serving organization, to request a Child Protective Services background clearance before hiring an applicant. The amendments make significant changes to this bill. You can find them on page 43 of the voting packet. And essentially, it's striking all of these provisions of the bill. And after a conversation with the sponsor to get closer to kind of her concerns, which led to the development of this bill, this amendment strikes the bill and substitutes 2 different parts. First, Part 1 requires each local school system to provide crisis support and assistance to a public school in the county when a teacher or other school employee with direct contact with minors is removed from the classroom or school building due to alleged criminal activity or for student safety, by establishing a specified crisis response team and standardized crisis response protocols. Part 2 of the bill requires the State Department of Education to convene a stakeholder work group to examine the impact on the public school system in the state of adding a requirement to the hiring process for applicants for a position involving direct contact with minors to include information regarding the applicant's history of boundary violating behavior. Specifically with this work group, they're looking at these definitions because these definitions are a little bit challenging. And youth-serving organizations in the state by adding requirements for hiring personnel and organization registration with an appropriate government agency. So it takes this and then it gives it an opportunity to figure out whether this would be administrative burden, what the cost would be, the timeliness, the impact on hiring employees for summer youth-serving organizations, and the work group itself would be looking at each of those definitions to determine if they meet certain criteria, and that's listed in the amendment.
Questions on the Guile amendment? We'll go with Senator Watson, Augustine, and then Caruso.
So tell me if I got this right, Stacey. So this, in effect, now becomes a study?
Part of it. Part 1 is a requirement on local school systems to provide specific support in a very certain instance. And they have to have standardized crisis response protocols if a teacher is removed from the school because of alleged criminal activity or student safety. So a teacher gets accused of a criminal act, maybe to hurt students. So Senator Giles' concern involved the school response to that particular scenario, and how could that be better to support all of the stakeholders in the school community, including the principal who might need guidance in this situation, the students who are experiencing trauma, the parents who are learning to deal with this trauma, other administrators and faculty in the school. How do they respond to children? How do they respond to a colleague under those circumstances? Legal guidance for all of these appropriate scenarios.
Got it. Now, I understand that part. There isn't a school that I don't know that requires every teacher to go through kind of a background check. And I know in Prince George's County, even the organization Malcolm and I belong to, anybody that's going to be in close continuing contact with students have to do it as well, right? So is she suggesting to, is that a part of this bill as well?
So the original part of the bill was that they would add this requirement that they also submit information about, the employer would submit information if a person who was going through the hiring process had done any of these boundary violating behaviors. The hard part of the bill was the definition of boundary violating behaviors.
That was my next one.
Right, and that's part of what the work group is set up to look at. Because of the definition, and it's kind of vague and open-ended, and it might overlap with existing, say, criminal activity. The cost of that, of adding that requirement, and maybe the ambiguity around the definition, we wanted MSDE, along with the stakeholders that are listed in the bill, to really take a look at that before adding that as a requirement.
All right, so my last question, and maybe this will come out once we firm up these definitions. If you have an organization, a youth organization, and you have somebody who committed a crime, committed an offense, but now has turned their life around, wants to help these kids re-engage, but they're more office people, back office people, not directly on a regular contact with students. Would this preclude them from being able to be hired to do that type of function?
So this is for applicants in positions with direct contact with minors. That is what the current law says, and that's what this maintains.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go to Senator Augustine, and then we'll go, actually, then we'll go to Senator Tar, and then we'll go to this side of the aisle. Senator Augustine?
Did these amendments, were they looked at by the superintendents and the?
No.
'Cause this is like really very prescriptive, it seems to me.
Which part?
Well, I'm just looking at.
Hey, Malcolm, just put your.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah,
I'm
put your
sorry.
mic, because people might not be
I'm
able to hear
sorry.
you.
I can't see anymore, so I got to wear these glasses. It's terrible. I'm looking at some of these shalls, and it's just like, shall establish a crisis response team. Now, that is a very actual specific sort of term, and there are certain things that are associated with that, and they mention some of them here, including a trauma-informed care counselor. I'm not sure how they can comply necessarily with this. It's challenging, plus the legal counsel that would be required of them, in as much as I support it. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't. I think it's great. But I just don't know how. I mean, this is just asking for, it seems to me like a lot as a mandate.
Well, I would just say that the legal counsel is, every school system has legal counsel. These are not requiring the school system go outside and hire a counsel. This is for the school counsel to be able to sit down and say, okay, in this scenario, what is school supposed to do? What kind of communications can you send? What should those communications say? What can't they say in order to ensure that an investigation is maintained, or the integrity of an investigation is maintained? current law also requires certain counselors to use a trauma-informed approach in schools. So all schools, assuming at this point, do have a trauma-informed counselor somewhere in the school system.
The school system, I mean, we've got hundreds of schools. I mean, I'm just saying, like.
This isn't per school, this is in the local school system. Like, say Harford County Schools. On the local school level, not that, on the county board level, where think of MSDE, right, is a department, while the Harford County School system, that's
So
the
you've gone
department.
to all of the systems and you know they all have this crisis response team?
No, they don't have it, that's the requirement in the bill. That they,
And how are they going to get the crisis response team as much as we've struggled to build crisis response teams across the state?
I don't understand, what do you mean struggled, for what purpose?
I mean, this is the stuff that, I mean, it's not been so easy to build crisis response teams across the state. It's a defined entity, a crisis response team. And what
Senator Watson has a thought on that.
I understand where he's going, but, you know, almost in every school system, when there's something magnitude, school shootings, there is a crisis response team that gets deployed. And it's not that it has to exist in an individual school, but it's something that sits at a higher level, you know, kind of oversight from the Board of Education. It goes in with those specific functions, the counselors, you know, the crisis handlers and those types of things.
This specifically calls out trauma-informed care counselors. So this is not like your normal sort of just any old sort of crisis response team. This has got some specific things to it.
And I understand. What I'm trying to get at is that there is a consortium of trained folks that handle very specific things that can be called upon when needed by most school systems that I'm familiar with. Trauma, death, rape, you know, it just depends on what it is. But these resources do exist, you know, in the school system.
Okay, let's go to let's go to Senator Attar and then go to this side. You didn't hear me say that.
Thank you,
Senator Attar, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the original bill had a provision that required a CPS background clearance before hiring. Why was that removed? What was the concern about that?
So the concern with the underlying bill was the cost and administrative burden. And the thought with the sponsor was to pull it back a little bit, get an idea of, first of all, changing these definitions and what that would impact on the school system overall. So in making the decisions about what to put in the amendments, that particular piece was decided not to include at this time.
Okay, I'd like to see it in there, but I understand.
Okay. Do we have other questions on this side? Okay. Okay, do people feel like they need a little more information before we take a vote on this? We can, again, bump this till tomorrow, or are people ready to roll? Give me a little feedback. Who feels like they need some additional information to either take up the amendments or vote the bill? I'm sorry?
I just want that one provision in, but if we're not going to do that, then I'm good with voting now.
Okay. Okay. Any final questions? Otherwise, we'll just roll. Is there a motion to adopt the Guile amendments? Okay, Senator Kagan moves the Guile amendments. Is there a second? Okay, second from Senator Simon Ayer. Okay, all in favor of the Guile amendments, raise your hand. Raise your hand. All opposed? The amendments carry. We now have Senate Bill 770 as amended before us. Is there a motion? Senator Kagan moves the bill as amended. Is there a second? Is there a second from Senator Watson? All in favor of Senate Bill 770 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed?
Yeah, I'm not on this one.
Okay, is it no or an abstention?
Yeah,
no, okay. So that bill carries 9-2 with Senators Augustine and Carroza in the red. You got that? Okay. Stacy, let's leap ahead. Let's go over to 845, and then we're going to come back to the Muse bill next. Let's skip over the Carroza bill. We'll come back to that, but can we go to 845, and then we'll go to the Muse bill, and then we'll go to the Carroza bill. Sure.
Sorry, back on the Guile amendment. So there's a report coming to the General Assembly can we just, it doesn't have to come to our committee, but can somebody just flag it so that, like, all these reports go to the General Assembly and I never know when they arrive? Like, if I actually want to read the report, what do I do?
So the library
guy-
does send out a link. I mean, you can get, every month, they send out a, like an update that says all the links to all the reports that come into the library. You just have to subscribe to it.
Can you tell me where to subscribe?
Sure, well, after the voting session, happy to
Thank
do
you so
that.
much.
Okay, okay, let's go to 8:45, and then we're going to come back to the Muse bill. Yes.
Senate
So-
Bill 845, Local Education Agencies, Educator Screening, NASTEC Clearinghouse, the School Personnel Vetting and Hiring Transparency Act. This bill requires each local school system in Maryland to become an associate member of the National Association of State Directors of Teacher Education and Certification, NASTEC, and use its educator identification clearinghouse to screen all current and prospective educators beginning on July 1, 2025. The same amendment that was before from Senator Hettleman is on page 55 of your voting packet. The amendment requires the department to register each LEA in the state as an associate member of NASTEC and pay the applicable fees and dues. An LEA is required to utilize the clearinghouse to screen each individual who applies for an educator position on or after July 1, 2025. Senator Hettleman has talked with MSDE and with PZAM, and all agree that they would prefer to move forward with these amendments.
They were the ones that had some issues. If you remember, Mary Pat Fannin was here, and we held the bill now. She would prefer that we move forward with the bill. Senator Watson?
So that did include MAPE? They are favorable now?
I don't know about PZAM and MSDE, and Hettleman said yes, even though they do have access. Apparently, when you sign up as an associate, there's other benefits that come with that. So with that understanding, PZAM was comfortable with it, and MSD said they liked the bill.
So I've not heard of this system before, and I'm trying to figure out what makes this system better than the process they already use to vet new employees. Why do we even need it? Huh?
I thought this was the system that they used.
That's what she said.
Is it?
No, they have a system, and that this is part of that system, she said, but if you sign up specifically for this system, there was additional benefits, and I'll just be honest, I don't know what they are.
Okay. Yeah.
It actually goes back to, if you look back at the Senator Guile, the amendments, and I wanted to ask the question then, I forgot, I was thinking about this NASDAQ clearinghouse for hiring, but if you look back at the Guile amendment, it has a requirement about the hiring process. So I was trying to figure out how the two pieces might impact local school systems.
So this bill would require each LEA, it says, to screen all current prospective, they would have to put it in during the hiring process. The concern that PZAM had is that there's a timing issue here. Certain people can be hired, on a probationary basis as all of the paperwork gets cleared up. So my understanding is that they would have to put the name into the system before the actual hiring took place. And so the Guile bill, I mean, that's an existing process. If you recall, Delegate Wilson had set up that entire new structure for hiring that required all of these individuals to go through this process for if you have a position with direct contact with minors. That one was adding to that system, that boundary violating behavior stuff. So, I mean, this works in
Are they
concert
consistent?
together.
Because it says, that's what I'm trying to find out, if it's consistent, because in the language it says that you would be adding a certain requirement to the hiring process as part of this work group that was established. And then now we're mandating that
So this is just another way of checking other things. So this is not like a background check.
This is a supplement.
So, right, other states, if there's a licensed teacher and they're part of this, if something happens, there's a complaint filed, there's an investigation, there's a conviction, this gets put in this clearinghouse database. schools can come in there and look at them and the impact on their license, not necessarily in the criminal, as a conviction in the court system. It's just another way of looking at an
Okay, thank you.
applicant.
Yeah, let's go to Senator Augustine and Vice Chair Kagan.
I'm just going to ask again. MABE is the ones who are unfavorable. PZAM was favorable with amendment. Is MABE now no longer unfavorable?
I have no idea because they weren't involved in the discussion.
Okay, you said that PZAM was against it and now they're for it, but they came in favorable with amendment. So that's a little bit of a different characterization. Would you agree?
All I know is MSTE, PZAM, and Senator Hedelman spoke, and they all agreed, and this is where they're at.
So the way I read.
Okay, wait a second, Senator Watson, I call Vice Chair Kagan, then we're going to go to Senator Watson.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
If this is
Senator-
continuing.
Okay, we'll yield to Senator Watson.
Yeah, so I had to go back and read what NASDAQ is, and it wasn't established till 1985, and it just looks like a company, and if we go with this, it'll give them a lot of business, let's put it like that. But what this does, and it reminds me of being on judiciary when we had to go back and how far back into a police officer's record do you go for administrative issues that they've had along the course of their career. This is what this system will capture, the administrative pieces that when they go now looking for a job, somebody can look at their whole history, no matter how long it occurs. And I can't support it if MABE doesn't support it. I can understand PZAM because they're the ones who issue the administrative issues. They're the ones who put those complaints in place. The MABE folks are your teachers and the other folks who are the recipients of those actions. And I just have a problem that they're on different sides of this. So I'll be a no.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I support the concept, and I support the details and the amendment. The question that I had asked, and I forgot to ask Senator Hedelman about today, which is, are there lots of companies that do this, or are these guys sort of the good housekeeping seal of approval? What I wonder is when we pass laws, I'm echoing Senator Watson in the respect of, I don't love putting a specific company name in our law books, because if 50 years from now, they may be out of business and there may be a better, cheaper, more thorough, blah, blah, blah. So I would love the opportunity to check in, do a little bit of research, and we can check with MABE and PZAM, and we can see about NASDAQ.
Okay, we're going to bump this also to tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't want to spend more time. I mean, we've got a cadre of bills we held and, with questions, and we will take them up one way or the other tomorrow. And although we may need, just in the interest of full disclosure, we might want to go to a 9:45 starting point, but maybe, yeah, or 9:30, but that's okay. No, not earlier. We're good. We're going to be meet. Given that, let's go to the Muse bill. And then I do, and Senator Carozza, I think, you have amendments that your bill did generate a lot of discussion last time. Let's put that till tomorrow. Let's go to the Muse bill, and then I want to give Senator Augustine an opportunity to at least give us a glimpse of where we are in the EPR, and then we'll stop there. But let's go to Devin and Senate Bill 587 with Senator Muse.
Senate Bill 587, State Government Maryland Reparations Commission. This bill establishes the Maryland Reparations Commission, staffed by the Maryland State Archives and a publicly historically black college or university represented as a member of the commission. The commission must study and make recommendations relating to appropriate benefits to be offered to individuals impacted by historical inequality. By January 1, 2027, submit a preliminary report of its findings and recommendations, and by November 1, 2027, submit a final report of its findings and recommendations to the Governor and the General Assembly. Commission members may not receive compensation but are entitled to reimbursement for its expenses. The bill takes effect July 1, 2025 and terminates June 30, 2028. There are no amendments.
Okay, who else would like to be a co-sponsor? We've got Senator Washington, Brooks, and Augustine. Anybody else? Okay, all in favor of the sponsor amendments? No other amendments, raise your hand. Sponsorship amendments do carry. Okay, we've got Senate Bill 587 as amended with the sponsor amendments moved by Senator Augustine, seconded by Senator Washington. We'll take a roll call on this. Well, first of all, questions. Okay, we're going to take a roll call on this one.
All right.
Lemuria?
Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine? Yes. Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion?
No, and to explain my vote, I think this should be handled at the federal level. I just have issue with state by state, so.
All right, Senator Watson? Yes. Senator Watson, yes. Senator Attar? Yes. Senator Attar, yes. Senator Brooks?
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza? No. Senator Carozza, no. Senator Hester? Yes. Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington? Yes. Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonaire? No. Senator Simonaire, no. Senator Feldman?
Yes, bill carries 8-3. Okay, with that, let's go, we're going to yield to Senator Augustine and to April Morton to give us an overview of where we are on Senate Bill 901. And we're not going to vote this today, but we are going to talk about it, go through it, and then when we reconvene, we'll be a little bit ahead of the curve. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So would you like me to start with April to go, or let's go to Senator Augustine to give us the overview?
I just want to say a word on it. I just want to say that April Morton is amazing. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, Ross heard that right before Ross left.
Just, she really is. And, you know, in some ways, I also have to apologize to her for like loading her up here on this. But what you all, thank you to you all from a couple years ago when we passed the EPR to start. I just want to like frame it up a little bit, where we passed the EPR out of here. And we came to some decisions, we made some compromises, and we did everything that we could. And again, we're talking about making packaging more circular. So trying to make sure that, as we always talk about, that Tide bottle that is orange, if you all remember, the orange Tide bottle, which is not as eco-friendly as if it were clear and had a little label on it. And making it, you know, getting getting it such that those brand owners have some skin in the game and that they have an incentive to do a better job, and that we will also be able to recoup some of these costs while we're doing better for our environment. And I think about, for example, I really also think about today now, given sort of like what's happening to us federally, where aluminum and all the, you know, all these products like that we're facing and everything else. I mean, we really do need to do a better job of reusing, recycling all of the things that we have. And so that's really what this is about. Thanks to you all, we did a needs assessment, which everybody kind of across the country has said is like a good first step. We established an advisory group to look at this and assess and provide recommendations to us. We selected a group that's going to end up running it. We did all that from work that we did 2 years ago, which I'm grateful for. That group was meeting, they established it, MDE worked on it. They've been a fantastic partner on this. They did the study, so we got the needs assessment back. The advisory group kept meeting, they met, they delivered recommendations to us. And there also came about a sort of best practices place, which is the state of Minnesota, who had passed legislation relatively recently on this and had worked through a lot of the compromises that were required to sort of make this thing work and also sort of simplify it out. And then on last Friday, we brought those different stakeholders in together with those things, all of those things in that framework and all the compromises and everything else, and listened to it all. And then and April took in all of that, all those different pieces, all those different parts and all that work, and put together what she's going to walk through now. And that's why I'm just saying I'm really, really grateful to her for that effort as we walk through it. So thank you.
Before we walk through it, I see a light from Senator Hester. Any kind of big picture? Your light's on. Oh.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just want to, applaud not only April, but the senator for his leadership in this area. I know you worked really hard on this for like 3 years.
Yeah.
I was just curious, with the needs assessment, I was really curious about the jobs component of that. Do we get, because we checked in like December and the needs assessment wasn't out. Did we actually get the needs assessment?
Yes, we now have it. If you would like a copy of it, it's out. It's on the website. So there's a website that's associated with the, I think it's the PRO itself. It's the whole sort of entity. It's either the advisory council, but it is, if you go to MDE's site,
Okay,
they're
great,
ready
thanks.
for it. That assessment is there. Thank you. That was from you, actually, if you recall, that we worked on that.
Good
and that
teamwork.
we did that. Yes.
Okay, we're going to now go to April to kind of walk us through this composition of work that started last Friday. Okay, April?
All right, and this is going to be fairly high level. If you have questions, I think maybe ask them as we go along, but also with the understanding that we will probably take this up again tomorrow. And yeah. So just generally, broadly, the structure that this bill establishes is an extended producer responsibility program for packaging and paper products. Collectively, those two categories are being called covered materials. So this is your plastics, your bottles, but also your paper, printer paper, other paper products, although there are a number of exclusions, exceptions, which we'll get into in a bit. So again, broadly, requires producers of covered materials to individually or through the producer responsibility organization selected by the department, submit a producer responsibility plan to the department and to take certain actions in accordance with that plan. It allows the producer responsibility organization to collect fees from its member producers. It allows service providers, so those are local governments and private entities that provide certain recycling and composting services, to seek reimbursement from the PRO, Producer Responsibility Organization. I'm going to use PRO as we go through this, for certain costs related to providing covered services, it's a defined term, to covered entities. Covered entities are residential properties, schools and child care centers, and state and local public buildings. And finally, broadly, this program authorizes the department to take...
Thank you for asking. I'm chewing. Go ahead. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
To take certain enforcement actions against a producer or the PRO if they fail to meet goals and requirements of this act. So to dive in, and you should have a reprint on your desk. We'll start with pages 3 through 6. We'll just take this in order. So the state already did that needs assessment, but this would set up an ongoing requirement for that recycling needs assessment to be completed every 5 years. Broadly, the requirements for this assessment are the same as for that previous assessment, although there have been, it's been tweaked a little bit to also bring in a little bit more about reuse, which is sort of an area that particularly MDE is very interested in as, landfill space kind of goes away. Adds additional language around reusable packaging and reuse infrastructure, and then also requires the PRO to reimburse the department for the cost both of the most recent assessment and then any future assessments. So in line with this idea of cost shifting to the producers of these materials. So that's broadly pages 3 through 6. Next, the next sort of substantive part starts on page 8. This outlines, this is where we actually dive into what this Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, program will look like. And we start with definitions. The definitions are worth paying attention to because there's a lot of kind of substance and meat to these definitions. I'm just going to call out a few of them, but please, if you can, take the time to read through. The first is covered entity. So this is on page 9. I'm sorry, we're looking at the page numbers on at the bottom of the pages rather than the tops. Page 9, covered entities. So these are the entities for which service providers may seek reimbursements from the PRO. So again, the covered entities are defined to be single-family residences, multifamily residences, public or non-public K through 12 education or schools, child care centers, and public buildings owned or operated by the state or a local government.
April?
Yes.
I do, thank you. Thank you very much for watching us. So I'm on page 8 of the reprint, lines 13 through 16, and I'm just chewing through this for a second. One of the things I've tried to work on over the years, yes, of the reprint. Actually, it's page 8 on both, but yes. Lines 13 through 16. Separate account, cost of statewide recycling needs assessment, blah, blah, blah. Can you just, and I don't know if this is so basic, we all do recycling very differently in different parts of the state. And I can say in Montgomery County and in Rockville anyway, we've got single stream and we recycle kind of a ton of stuff. There's many places in the state that have 0. And there is no place you can walk around with your can or bottle to make sure that it is going to be recycled. How would this affect the disparate programs and plans in our 24 jurisdictions and our municipalities?
So the section that you're looking at, and the reason why I skipped it is this is not particularly substantive. This just has to do where certain fees are going. This is an existing account within the department.
Okay.
This is sort of administrative fees.
So ignore that I was talking about that
Right.
section. The big picture will, Dorchester County.
Yeah, she got it.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the way that this structure works is that you have the PRO is coming up with this plan that is defining certain goals, et cetera, and we'll get into specifics of what is in that plan. But a big part of what that plan has to include is reimbursement rates for service providers. Now, a service provider could be a county that provides curbside recycling services. It could be a private entity that has a contract with a school to pick up their recyclables and take it to whatever MRF. It's really whatever is happening in whatever jurisdiction. And then they can go, the service provider under the structure goes to the PRO essentially and requests reimbursement for those recycling, for the cost of their program to collect, transport, clean, process those recyclables, however they're doing it. So the idea here is because by reducing the cost for the local governments or for whoever else who's doing this, so it's not relying so much on taxpayer dollars, is then that opens up their ability to invest in more infrastructure, to improve their program, to potentially offer services that they're not currently providing.
And I would also just say, like, one of the stakeholder groups that is here is Maryland Recycling Network, and they represent those different counties and how they do their recycling. And so they said, hey, Montgomery County is single stream. We want to make sure that we still are able to have the flexibility to be able to get reimbursed for what we do versus the others that do have dual stream. I'm sorry, Montgomery is dual stream. Said it backwards. You all are dual stream, and Prince George is a single stream, for example. So that we have created that flexibility to be able to do both and still work within the existing to do it.
For folks at home, maybe we ought to just define single stream and dual stream.
So single stream is like at my house, we just got one blue bin. You put all of your paper, you put all of your plastics and everything in one. And then in Montgomery County, they have a separate one for your paper, right?
In Rockville, we have single stream. Stream.
Okay, well, Rockville, but Montgomery County
Montgomery-
has dual stream. So they have where you put paper in one and you put the other products in another. And that's how their system is set up. And so this has the flexibility. We've built in the flexibility and they've looked at it to be able to support either way and also pick up places. You know, it's just flexible.
Thank you.
So continuing to run through definitions, page 9, so we have the covered entities, we have covered materials. So again, this is a term that's used throughout this bill, but it includes packaging and paper products. I mean, it does not include exempt materials. We'll go into details of what all those definitions are as well. So covered services, again, these are the services that these service providers, these counties and whoever else who are offering recycling services can seek reimbursement. It's defined to include collection, transport, processing costs, as well as related education and outreach costs. So if your county is doing outreach to residents to let them know what is recyclable, what can go in that blue bin. Exempt materials, we're now on page 10. So these are things that, and it's a long list, page 10, so these are all the things that are not covered in this program. You may recall that there was quite a bit of discussion around exemptions 2 years ago when this bill first came up. Everything that was exempt under that bill is exempt under this bill and more, because this is also pulling from a lot of the compromises that were reached in Minnesota. Next page definition to focus on is packaging. So this is a subset of that covered material. It's going to look like we took out exemptions, but that's because those exemptions were moved to this exempt materials definition. So but it's this packaging is what you think of as packaging. In addition to service packaging, such as carryout bags, bulk good bags, and food serviceware. Paper products, so this is going on to page 12 of the bill. This is new, this is something new from the last version of this bill, but there's a fair amount of agreement that it is important to include paper in addition to packaging in the EPR program because paper is a substantial part of the recyclables that are collected in curbside recycling programs and other sorts of recycling programs. So paper product is defined to mean a product made primarily from wood pulp or other cellulosic fibers. It does not include bound books or products that are not accepted by materials recycling facilities or composting facilities because of their unsafe or unsanitary nature. Toilet paper, things like that. There are additional exemptions, which again, I would refer you back to that exempt materials definition. So it also doesn't include newspaper, for example. It would include things like catalogs, telephone books, et cetera. Next definition to focus on is producer. This is from pages 12 through 14. So these are the entities that are going to be required to register with the PRO and to take actions consistent with the producer responsibility plan. This is updated somewhat from the previous version of this bill. The new definition, again, is based on the Minnesota law and is widely agreed to by the stakeholders. Moreover, we have retained the exemptions from the bill 2 years ago for some restaurants and alcoholic beverage companies. Yes.
So, I mean, I've been from the first page with the producer responsibility organizations, and now we're getting to the definition of producers. Do we have a list in Maryland of the producer, the employers that would be responsible under this plan? Is there a comprehensive list?
I wouldn't say that there is. That's part of the program is for people to register with the PRO. That's a part of what happens within this, based on the definitions that we lay out. But they are,
But you would be requiring them to, under this, you're requiring them to register.
they are, yeah.
So, I mean, I haven't had, we're going through this now, but obviously I would turn to the Maryland Chamber of Commerce to say, who does, trying to get a breadth of how many employers across the state of Maryland that this will affect.
Okay. I mean,
We don't have that. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I don't have the employers. The stakeholder group has been broad of those who have participated in this process. So, I mean, we can try to get you information about who the entities are that have been included. Unless, April, you got a different answer.
Yeah, and I would stress that, and again, this is why these definitions are important. So one of the things that is exempt from the definition of producer is something called a de minimis producer, which is defined on page 9 to mean a person that in their most recent fiscal year introduced less than 1 ton of covered material into the state, or earned global gross revenues of less than $2 million. So
in essence, all employers, except small businesses.
that are introducing more than a ton of covered materials. So and would also be ones that are, we're not talking about the retailers, right? We're talking about the brand owners. So, McCormick is covered, for example, because they.
I mean, but we'll.
Yeah, it is the large companies, but yes.
Because, the ones that are in your stores, those are the brands that we're talking about, that are the producers.
Senator Cruz is asking, but that was like back on covered entity, which is on page 9, which it talks about the residences and then schools, childcare centers, and public buildings, but there's no businesses there.
Yep.
So does that mean that they don't have to participate or they can participate?
That was one of the compromises that was made. There are already some who are commercially, it's a little more challenging to include them. They also already have like closed systems where they're using the packaging itself. And so there was pretty broad agreement amongst the stakeholder groups that it made sense to start with the residential because of the complications that were associated with the commercial. That was.
So this isn't the end product, this is the next step in the journey.
Yeah, it is definitely a significant part, but the needs assessment did show, and MDE did talk about, like, that there is also some opportunity in the commercial space. There's not saying that there wasn't, that's part of it, but again, just sort of like broad consensus sort of across of where things have been and lessons learned from other states that have gone before us is that you're better off for us to, if we want to be successful, to concentrate on these areas and not try to add the added layer of complication on the businesses and the commercial.
So the businesses that are included then are the big businesses that produce the packaging.
Absolutely. That's
Right.
Those are the brands. That's what is a producer. The
Right.
producer are the big ones who are selling in the store, but big ones, like, yeah, the big brands. And we have the limitations it's not for the ones, that's where April was talking about the smaller businesses who are under that threshold in our state, they are not included in it.
So the brand owner, so that's going to be the person that really owns the brand, not the manufacturer, the person who's doing the packaging.
We worked out some language on that. And April, you want to just answer from that what we worked on that?
Yeah.
I know he's moving forward.
For the most part, it's going to be your brand owner. In cases where the brand owner is the manufacturer, it's both. There's like a whole hierarchy in the bill, so basically the first one is if it's sold in packaging under the brand of the item manufacturer, then it's the manufacturer, or without brand identification, then it's the manufacturer. If that's not the case, it's then the producer is the person who is licensed to manufacture or offer for sale. And it just keeps kind of going down, like if you don't have a brand owner, then it's the licensee. If you don't have the licensee, then it's this person. And it just kind of keeps going down this kind of chain in terms of who is the producer.
Well, for the most part, those are more the exceptions versus the rule. The rule is McCormick, as you saw, they came here, they've got that package, they're a spice seller, but they sell spices in a package. And they are the brand owner of Old Bay. And so they're the ones who are responsible for that package that they're selling their Old Bay in.
Like, I know you've got some larger manufacturers who make products for stores.
Yes.
Yep. And then even though the store might be the one whose
their name is on it.
Name is on the package, but the manufacturer is the one who's putting in the putting the product in the bottle.
That's part of the hierarchy that April is talking about that addresses those different types of situations in order to help to identify who is the appropriate brand owner.
Gotcha. Okay.
That would then be the producer.
Okay.
And I should just add that there's a different hierarchy for the paper, because the paper, so is it the publisher, there's also spelled out in that producer definition, sort of a separate hierarchy for paper products. So the final definition that I just want to call everybody's attention to is on page 16. This is the definition of service provider. So these are, again, the entities that are going to be eligible to be seeking reimbursement under this program. It's an entity that provides covered services. Those are those recycling and composting. 16, looking at bottom of the pages, page 16. It includes a local government that provides contracts for or otherwise arranges with another party to provide covered services within its jurisdiction. So, for example, if your county, even if they contract with a private entity to pick up the curbside recycling, it's still the county that's the service provider.
I have a question. Just trying to understand the relationships here. So you have the producer responsibility organization that has the requirements under this bill. And the service, what are the service providers? They're the ones that are seeking, they're seeking reimbursements for their recycling from the producer responsibility organization?
Right.
Got it.
All right, so the next piece of the bill, page 16, just has some intent language laying out the purpose.
April?
Yes.
I'm on 16, 17 here. Senator Augustine and you both have mentioned the framework. I'm on page 16, lines 7 and 8. The General Assembly hopes that there's going to be a framework for doing all the good things and reducing packaging and more composting and more recycling. Can you just talk about who's responsible for the framework? How does that, or is that further along? Okay, we're still in definitions. So
No,
I'll wait.
we're now in intent language.
Okay.
So this is just intent language.
Setting everything up. Okay.
So, yeah,
Thank
16,
you.
17 is just intent.
All good.
All right. So pages 17 through 20 are the Producer Responsibility Advisory Council. This is the group that has been meeting for the past 2 years to broadly outline the program. The bill simply expands their responsibilities
So,
to.
April, before you go past the intent language, I think it's important. I mean, this intent language, well, that was the Sierra Club, right? Just so that you know, like the Sierra Club asked for this intent language to ensure that we didn't lose track of, that we kept in mind that this started from, as Martha Ainsworth said, like minimizing environmental and human health impacts of packaging. And so that we make sure to stay focused on that. I just want to let you know that's why that was there from a stakeholder group.
Okay, so Producer Responsibility Advisory Council. This is the group that has been meeting for the past 2 years to broadly outline the program. The bill expands their responsibilities to include reviewing and advising on producer responsibility plans and other matters related to this EPR program. The bill also adds the Department of the Environment, a member from the Department of the Environment to the council as a non-voting and non-chairing member, and specifies that the representative from the PRO cannot serve as a chair or co-chair of the advisory council. So we're now kind of diving into the substance of how this program is going to work. This is on page 20 of the bill. So this is requiring registration and registration fees from the PRO. So the state has already selected a PRO. That was done under the previous bill. The PRO the idea was to select them so that they could be part of that advisory council process. So we already have the PRO in place. Beginning July 1st, 2026, the PRO must register annually with the department and pay a registration fee to the department. Part of that registration is laying out all of the producers that are participating in the PRO. So initially, we'd be using that PRO that was already selected. Additional PROs could be approved beginning in 2033 if the department feels like it would be useful to have more than one representing different, for example, categories of recyclable products. The next piece to talk about is on page 22. There is language in the amended bill that authorizes something called alternative collection programs. So this is where a producer or a group of producers may operate an alternative collection program, and if they do so, their cost under the program, under the producer responsibility program may be reduced. So if you have a sort of particularly difficult to recycle product or material type, if you come up with some sort of inventive way to collect and process that, that's sort of outside of the framework under the, sort of outlined here, that is authorized under the bill. Yes.
If we ever went down that better bottling bill slant, with those grocery stores that had to set up their own recycling and be able to collect, would that fall under alternative collection?
No, so it could be, the way that bill works is, no. And that's not this, but there is a provision later in the bill that talks about what would happen if the state were to move forward with a bottle deposit bill. Okay, so pages 23 through 35. So the initial step, right, is this registration process. As part of that, the PRO is going to be paying a registration fee to the department to sort of cover some of the startup cost for all this stuff. But then by July 1st, 2028, and every 5 years thereafter, the PRO would have to submit a producer responsibility plan to the department. So we're now on pages 23 through 35, so this is a large chunk of the bill. The plan must be developed in consultation with the advisory council. It must establish performance goals for each covered material type. These goals would include, as appropriate, recycling rates, composting rates, reuse rates, return rates, the percentage of covered material to be waste reduced, post-consumer recycled content requirements, and greenhouse gas reduction goals. So those goals are on page 23. The plan also has to explain how the program set up by the plan will be paid for by the PRO through fees from producers without any new or additional consumer-facing fees. That's on page 24. There is a limited exception for redeemable deposits. That's for things like, think about propane.
You got a propane tank and take on into consideration. You go there and pick up you got a deposit on it? Yeah. That's
you can still do that.
So this is an exception for that.
The plan also must describe the process by which covered entities may request reimbursements. It's on page 26. Those are sort of the big ticket items in the plan. There are other pieces of the plan, but those are the big ones. Establishing these goals and setting up this reimbursement process and reimbursement rates. The reimbursement rates requirements appear on page 28, and then there's more language on page 30 through 31. The reimbursement rates themselves would be laid out in the plan, but the law establishes certain parameters for how those rates should be set. It also, the law also sets up requirements for producer fees. So again, the way the money is sort of flowing here is producers, your brand owners, et cetera, are paying into the PRO. PRO is taking that money and using it to reimburse the service providers who are providing the recycling and composting services.
So this is literally like the heart of the bill. Remember when we started the conversation, it was, as it stands right now, for those recycling services that we have, there's not a mechanism to help get them paid for. Right now, we just pay for it out of our own sort of collective pocket, this is the place where we are now getting some of that money back, and it grows over time. That the folks who, so basically that package, McCormick, just use them as the example, is now going to help to defray the cost that we have for the recycling by these amounts of money that those service providers, those MRFs and everybody else it's costing them to get these materials recycled. So that this is like the heart of that portion, or this part of the bill.
And one thing to add there, so on page 32, it talks about how that fee structure should actually work, because it's not every brand owner is not paying the same amount. It's sort of based on essentially how difficult their product is or easy it is to recycle. So if you've got something that is more challenging to recycle, you're going to be paying a little more. And part of the idea there is to encourage people to move towards products, in developing a packaging, et cetera, that is more recyclable, includes more recycled content, is more compostable, or that can be reused.
Could you give just a couple random examples, would you mind? Easy or hard?
Yeah, I mean, so the people from McCormick sort of talked about it, the way that they've changed the design of their packaging to use plastic that is easier to recycle, for example, because there's different types of plastic, right? There's the ones that are a challenge.
Is the colored bottle.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the easiest one.
Yes.
The Tide bottle that is orange, that can't be made into anything else. It's like, I don't know what to do with it. If it were clear, then now it can be made into all kinds of different things. So like, that's kind of the easiest one. And they have a choice. They can make it orange, or they can make it clear with a label on it that's a paper, let's say, that's got some orange marketing material on it, but then it's way more recyclable.
Thank you.
So the next piece of the bill, pages 34 through 35, plan review and approval by MDE. So again, the PRO is coming up with this plan and constantly working with their producers to make the plan. They work with the advisory council as well. The MDE is the one that actually has to sign off on the plan. They are also reviewing, so part of I should back up a little bit, the fee structure under the plan, or the producer, the fees that the PRO is collecting from the producers, or proposing to collect from the producers, actually has to be reviewed by an independent financial auditor to make sure that the fees that they're collecting are actually commensurate with the cost of reimbursing entities and operating this program. So they're not just, it's a nonprofit, but to make sure they're not being wasteful. So MDE reviews the plan, reviews the work of the independent financial auditor. Once MDE approves the plan implementation begins within 60 days after plan approval. And the PRO must reimburse MDE for the cost of the plan review and oversight. Next big piece of the bill starts on page 36, service provider registration. So this is beginning January 1st, 2029. Service providers that want to seek reimbursement from the PRO have to register with MDE and just provide certain information to them. Jumping to page 37. Statewide list of recyclables. So by July 1st, 2027, MDE must develop, in consultation with various stakeholders, a list of covered materials that are generally recyclable or compostable through curbside recycling. So the idea is to have a statewide list of recyclables and compostable materials. Yeah, this is something that was actually brought up when we toured the recycling center, this idea that
No one knows.
nobody knows. And while it is true, this is not to say that every jurisdiction has to recycle or compost all of these, but it is to have sort of a baseline, sort of standard list. This list comes up in different ways throughout the bill, including the eco-modulation of fees. So these are the fees the producers have to pay, again, to the PRO, that we were saying if it's more recyclable, you pay a lower fee. One of the ways you demonstrate it's more recyclable is it's on this list.
So I literally went before the Rockville Mayor and Council with a bunch of my, I took out a bunch of my recyclables or the trash that I had created, and I literally asked, okay, this Cheetos bag, is that recyclable? And the washed out Chinese takeout, is that recyclable? I mean, I went through a whole bunch of things. Why 2 years? Can we start the process earlier? Or did the MDE said, no way we can get to it? Even if it's imperfect, if we could start it, it sure would help us
So
do
one
better.
of the concerns, so the timeline is set up so that list will be done before the plans is done and submitted. So it'll sort of be moving kind of with the development of that plan. But this is going to be a big lift for MDE, and one of the things that they wanted to make sure was that they'd have some funding. So the way this works is when the PRO registers with them in 2026, they're going to provide part of that registration fee is going to go towards the development of this list.
What I would say is that we've put a lot, we're asking a lot out of like MDE, and a lesson learned across at some of the other places is that it just takes more time, and it's just the right sort of cadence to make sure that it's successful. So we're trying to make sure. Sure.
Are there like reduction goals or associated with these? I mean, does each producer of plastics, do they have a specific goal that they need to be achieved as a part of the plan?
So it would be under the plan, yes.
Okay.
So that would be part of the thing that is spelled out in the plan. You might recall the version of this, of the similar bill that we passed 2 years ago put some of that in statute. This bill
one
does
does
not.
not.
It would require all of that to be spelled out in the
In their
plan.
individual plan?
One other question. April, like we import a lot of stuff. So what about the things that are made in China, things that are imported that still would
yeah.
fall down that tier?
It's on that tier. So it's,
Okay.
I believe it's, if there's nobody in the US that otherwise, I mean, so it still could be potentially the brand owner if they have control, if you're producing something that's packaged in China, but you have the ability as the brand owner to determine what that packaging is going to be,
Gotcha.
then it's still you. But if it's, one of these, some of these things you can buy off of Amazon or some of these other websites that are kind of direct shipped from China, it ends up being the importer in some
Right.
cases that is the producer.
I see.
It's all laid out in that producer definition.
Is there a enforcement, is this a voluntary program? Or is this, okay, so is there an enforcement component, like yeah.
It's on MDE, and we'll get to that provision of the bill, but they have the ability to fine a producer that is either, not covered by a plan when they should be, or is not in compliance with their plan. And they also have the ability to fine the PRO if the PRO is not kind of doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Because I wondered if since DNR already has a DNR police, or we already have, there's no, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
it's,
Because I don't really know how it gets enforced. They, MD doesn't have that. Well, they should be doing compliance, but this is different type of, I think, compliance that they do, so, okay.
Well, we're giving them the ability to at least to do it and to fine, so they have the ability to do it, for sure.
And then the fees, so there's fines for violating, and then there's fees, so if you want to produce a certain amount, then you pay. So if you are a Coca-Cola bottling plant, and you make the bottles, or are you the one that, you use the bottles? So is it coming from the makers of the bottles?
so in that case,
Coca-Cola Consolidated, I believe, they're set up in an interesting way. No, I know, I deal with that particular one, because what they've licensed, I believe, the Coke, and they then are the ones who are actually, I believe, they're the ones who are the producers of it, because they've licensed it, the brand and everything else, and so they would be the ones who would be a part of the PRO. And then have responsibility for the fees that are associated with it.
And then one more thing, are we just doing residential, or is this commercial?
so
Though
this
they
is, it is
handle our
primarily
local- in our
residential, but
region.
it's also for recycling from K through 12 education, the covered entities, yeah, and state and local government buildings.
So, thank you for going through this. I mean,
This is a general question?
yes.
Or a general comment?
Well, no, it's kind of a general question, getting on the cost and how it's getting passed down. So is this the right time to ask that, or should I wait till you're done going through the whole thing? Okay.
We're very close.
Yeah, we're almost there.
So, page 38 through 39, MDE has the authority to exempt additional materials. So there were the defined exempted materials, but a producer could also request an exemption for additional materials if specific federal or state health and safety requirements prevent the packaging from being waste reduced or made reusable, recyclable, or compostable. It's on pages 38 through 39. MDE reviews and may grant an exemption for a period of 2 years, but that can be extended. Annual report, page 39 through 41. The PRO must produce an annual implementation report as specified. And then finally, implementing regulations, page 41. MDE is authorized to adopt implementing regulations. Spells out a couple of specific things that those regulations have to address. And then finally, enforcement. So current law provisions of the environment article apply to enforce violations under the bill. In addition, a producer or producer responsibility organization that violates the act is subject to an administrative penalty of $5,000 for a first violation, an administrative penalty of $10,000 for a second violation, and a civil penalty of $20,000 for a third or subsequent violation. Before imposing a penalty on a producer, the department must first issue a written notice and give the producer an opportunity to correct the violation within 60 days after receipt of the written notice. After the 60-day period, each day that a violation continues is a separate violation. Finally, the MDE may impose an administrative penalty on the PRO itself if, based on the annual report submitted, the performance goals established under the plan have not been achieved. So that penalty may not exceed $250,000. So that's, remember, they've got those goals that are actually being set within the plan. the PRO has some skin in the game. They themselves could be fined if those goals are not being met. So finally, the very last piece, just want to point out, is on page 42. We have uncodified language dealing with what happens if a bottle deposit return program is enacted. This was language specifically recommended by the advisory council. I should add that a lot of these provisions were either directly or based off of recommendations from that advisory council. But says that MDE would have to coordinate the implementation of any container deposit return program in a manner that ensures compatibility with the plan, the producer responsibility plans and related provisions of law, and ensure that materials covered in a beverage container deposit program are exempt from producer responsibility plans or related financial obligations are reduced. So the idea being, if state does move forward with a bottle deposit program, not to basically be hitting bottles, the beverage container companies twice.
Okay, that was quite a lot there. Everybody awake? Yeah. You lost a couple folks. You had kind of big picture questions?
Yes.
Just put it out there.
Try not to pun here, but there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot of material here. Thank you for going through it. Kind of reminds me of a few years ago going through like Kerwin and a couple other like climate solutions, stuff like that. So it's pretty big. My question, I guess, with the brand owner to set this up with the fees or whatever they're going to have to pay, that's going to potentially get passed down. Has that been looked at? Like how? Like we're already hearing concerns about the price of groceries, stuff like that. So I'm just wondering how much this is going to affect people at the end at the store, with how much more they're going to have to pay for stuff because of these passed down costs.
The producers, many of the producers, and you can talk to them. I'd be happy to have them reach out to you and everything else. They see it's a complete thing. And they are participating in this with the understanding that as a whole, it won't cost more to the end user. They're trying to be a part of this such that it's more circular and they're able to, in many instances, in some instances rather, get the materials back for it. And the other part that I will share with you is that we are moving the costs. It's not that the costs they're not going away or anything else like that. I'll just go back to what I shared with you before. The whole thing with this is trying to make this more efficient to reduce what we're paying for waste disposal, to reduce what we're paying for to do the recycling that we already do. And so that the net of this, once we get this better aligned, the net of it over time is that it will be better for our environment, more circular, and therefore cost less over time, not more, to the end user.
And then just one other thing. I know it's getting late. We talked about all the extra workload kind of on MDE. Is there any like ballpark of how many more employees they're going to need, like positions to be able to?
We've talked with them about it, but here's the thing that MDE has done inside of this bill is that they've made sure that the entity that's created is going to pay for it, right? And there's been broad agreement again from the folks who are involved that the work that's required to administer this program, to bring it up, stand it up, everything else will be borne by the producers, and that'll be a part of what they do because they believe in it, and they'll be a part of it for the most part. And so those costs are inside of that. Remember, this is like a part of the cost of them doing business as well, like any other business would have. So it's moved out of state dollars or local and county dollars and into the PRO.
Okay. So through the PRO, through the budget is going to pay extra state employees, basically?
There's actually language, so for example, where there's reimbursement, and April, you could talk about the reimbursement language, maybe that'll help.
Okay. I'm just curious, how many more people at MDE will it take to be able to make all this work? Because even you mentioned it's going to be, there's a lot there.
There is over
that.
time. Yeah.
I mean, would it be
Okay.
10 more people? Yeah, I was just curious.
That's fine. I mean, we can ask. What I was trying to suggest is that we can ask, but that the people, we're not, as a state, we're not going to pay for them because those costs are going to be assumed by the entity itself.
This is according to the fiscal note, which would have been developed reaching out to MDE. They're anticipating cost of hiring 2 natural resources planners, 1 administrative specialist, 1 additional natural resources planner in fiscal 2026, and then 2 environmental compliance specialists. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 total. But as Senator Augustine said, it's a little bit weird, and the fiscal note is based off of the bill as introduced, where the timeline is a little bit off. The amendments shift some of those payments forward, but the expectation is that that total cost for all those additional people would be about $300,000 a year, but that would ultimately be absorbed by the PRO. So it would be paid into special funds for the department.
How do you come up with $300,000 a year for 6 employees? It's only $50,000, and with benefits and everything else, that doesn't. I don't see how that math works.
Some of those might be. I'm not sure if all those are full-time positions, but I'll have to take another look at the fiscal note. But it's again, that was based off of MDE's.
Do they still have an office of recycling? Because I'm saying that's like in the code.
Yes. Yeah.
So, okay, so is that where this would be happening?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really impressive and such an important issue, so thank you. I had 3 questions, and Senator Gallion got one of them, which is the burden on MDE, the Maryland Department of the Environment, so I think that's a really good and important question. Two questions, I don't think either of them are super hard or long. Where else has this been done, and how similar is this revised version? And if you want to check on that, and then I have another question.
Okay. I mean,
you mentioned Minnesota. We've heard a lot about Minnesota.
There are 5 states.
Can you just say?
And they are, but they do it differently. Like they are sort of different.
Minnesota was always held
They
out to be
kept
like the
talking
gold
about
standard.
Minnesota.
Yeah, because that's sort of like, they're like one of the last ones, so they're like a lesson learned.
Most
Oregon,
recent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maine went early, Colorado, and I think it's California.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Actually.
And those ones have
one more.
already gone,
Yeah.
and that's what we would be, and the others are obviously still working on it too.
So I'm assuming this is then, I'm projecting, closest to Minnesota, but maybe
Correct.
take cherry picks from Colorado and Maine and whatever?
Now, more so like if we can, where I started from, more than that, it's what we did in some of the compromises and stuff like that we did, that we voted out and sent over. And then layered on top of that, what the folks of Minnesota, for sure, like that really was layered on top. And then layered on top of that was the recommendations from the stakeholder group that was put together here in our state.
Right.
And so that's what you have in front of you.
Right. And then my other question, thank you. My other question, and I'm happy to get it later or emailed or April if it's easy or whatever. Who was in the room and who wasn't in the room Because we're looking at a group cooking project, and you've mentioned Sierra Club, you've mentioned McCormick, and you've mentioned MDE, but I unfortunately couldn't come to the meeting last Friday, and so I don't know who was in the room where it
There's
happened.
about 45 people in here.
I'm sure it was. I would be curious also who wasn't there and who we're gonna hear from, because we didn't consider their little thing, their aspect
So
of
I
it.
will say this, there are, there are compromises, so there
Sure.
are some folks who, they, we did not, we heard it, we didn't take it, and there
Sure.
still are some additional, like a couple few that have come in late that April and I have not talked about just yet, but it's a broad group. We can definitely share with you who also were on the advisory council, because a lot of them were a part of the advisory
Yes,
council.
sure.
Were the people that were here,
Right.
that came.
But that's
and-
21 people versus you said 45.
Yeah, because
So-
there was like 45, because then others, came to be a part.
Came
of
to the party.
They did.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd love to see the list.
Okay, I think this would be a good, maybe place to end, because I think people are going to go to sleep on us, and that's not helpful to the, I do have one, where's the house on all this stuff?
I
The
have talked
chamber.
to, I've
Okay.
definitely spoken with the chair on it, all right? And I'm set to work with Delegate Stein, just trying to get to the
Okay.
point of having a good,
Perfect.
he's aware though, for sure.
Okay, guys, why don't we stop here? And look, we're in the crunch time. This is, the tough week, just got to kind of get to Monday and survive. Everybody's feeling it. Don't hate me, but I did say 10. I feel like with this bill,
it's taking
we
time.
might need to move it a little bit earlier. How about, can we go 9:30?
Yeah.
Can we go 9:30? Give us a little more time to jam through some loose end bills. We held some bills and whatever. We're in session 11. And then I don't think we're going to be in on Saturday, notwithstanding whatever the Senate President says. I don't think so. So, yeah, let's just do our thing tomorrow and Monday, and then I think things are going to be good. So, okay? Okay, the meeting's hereby adjourned.
Oh, they can definitely keep theirs, and April sent it to the stakeholders. Maybe we could send it to the committee as well. If you took your notes and stuff like that on the bill, just hold on to it.